Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and we're here again with another 2-hour compilation. If you're listening alone, that's good. If you're listening with headphones, that is even better. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the stories. Don't forget to subscribe.
What's the scariest thing that has ever happened to you but no one believes? I've told this story before, but I think it applies to this too. I always put my keys in the exact same spot after I get home from work, no matter what. They always go in the dish in my living room. One day, last August, I'd been home from work for a few hours and was cooking dinner when the thought of "where are your keys" got stuck in my head. I looked around the corner, sure as shit. I was going to see my keys in the dish, but there were no keys. I looked around the surrounding area and expanded my search to my purse, jacket, bedroom, only to turn up empty. I drove home from work and let myself in with my keys. I was home alone, and my roommates had been out of town for a few days at that point, so I knew I had them, and I knew no one would have moved them. I flipped my house upside down, searching for about 4 hours before I half-heartedly shook my heaviest winter coat hanging in the back of my closet. I found them, zipped up in the middle inside pocket of that coat I hadn't worn since mid-February at the latest. Everyone always brushes off the story as I must have moved them and forgot about it, but that makes no sense to me. I have absolutely no clue how they got there, and I really only have 4 possible explanations. Paranormal activity, glitch in the matrix, I blacked out and moved them for whatever reason, or there was someone in my house, and that was the only thing they did. It was the first anniversary of my aunt's death. She lived in the same house as me, but different apartment. I go to take a bath. The bathtub is positioned in a way that when you're inside, you are facing the window. Suddenly, I hear a knock. I look at the window, and I see a hand formed into a fist, quickly pulling down, like someone knocked and quickly disappeared. The thing is, my apartment was on the 2nd floor, and there is no way that someone could reach that window from outside at all. Now, looking back at it, I just tell myself it was my imagination, but then I know what I saw, and no one believed, of course. There was one moment that will stick with me forever that I get mixed reactions to when I tell the story. Let me start with adding some context. I was 20 at the time and was helping my girlfriend move from Alabama to Los Angeles. Because she had all her belongings and her car, we decided to drive. At that time, she had a suspended license, so I was the one who had forced to drive the whole way. Because I didn't want to get any speeding tickets, I brought my radar detector from home to take with us on the drive. Now, it was the 2nd day of our trip, and we had recently crossed into New Mexico. At the time, it was already well past sunset, so most of my drive that day was spent on the I-10 at night. Because I was the only driver, I made the decision to stop every couple of hours at rest stops to use the bathroom, stretch, or eat. I remember stopping that night really late, at around 11 or 12, at a rest stop in Gage, New Mexico. From what I remember, the rest stop was really the only thing off the exit, and there was nothing as far as a town or homes in the area for miles. The only thing there was a small area with many identical concrete structures covering picnic tables. They were like concrete boxes, 3-sided, with window cutouts and a light in the middle. As we were pulling in, the radar detector started going haywire, showing codes for multiple different bands including X, KA, and laser all at once. I turned the radar detector off, not really thinking much of it at the time, and pulled into a picnic area near the back. From what I remembered, I was going to eat a snack or something to tide me over, and as I was grabbing the food from the middle row, I heard a low rumble or squeak, as if someone was rubbing their palms along the side of the car. As I was grabbing some items from a bag in my lap, my girlfriend at the time grabbed my arm with the most intense grip and fear and just started saying, we gotta go, with increasing panic. I'll never forget what I saw, to be honest. In her side mirror, there was a large, rough silhouette leaning against the car just past the back door. Even from a glance, I could tell that the figure had to be much taller than the SUV, as it looked a bit hunched over. Seeing this, I immediately started to panic, as I was not sure if this was a person, animal, or whatever. As I was fumbling for the keys in the cup holder, I glanced in my side mirror and saw the exact same figure, motionless against the side of the car. A few seconds later, I started the car and punched it out of there. Where our car was parked, there was nothing visible from the light coming from the picnic awning. I'm not a huge believer in paranormal stuff, but this was an experience that I would 100% call my only real paranormal encounter. The size of whatever it was definitely not human, and although it was a somewhat human, the amount of hair it had on its head made it hard to tell what it actually looked like. A friend that I met later in college from New Mexico, who had lived on a reservation, once suggested that it could have been a Wendigo or some other native folklore beast. I still don't know at all what it was for sure, but I still occasionally have nightmares about that night. I live in an extremely old house. It creaks, it groans. The house isn't completely level, so sometimes unlatched doors swing open on their own, but really because physics. If you sat in my house on a windy day, you'd swear to God it was haunted because the window frames aren't great, and the wind screams through the gaps and rattles the glass as though it were angered. I say this because it's a normal old house. Nothing spooky, paranormal, ghost-like at all. To my knowledge, no one ever died here. There's no dark history, no spooky crimes, no local folklore, no curses, spells, or hexes. Just a normal, creaky old house. I've lived here for a couple of years now. I know every noise this house makes like the back of my hand. I hardly notice it these days, which is why I found it odd that when I was brushing my teeth one night a few months ago, I clearly heard two men's voices on the other side of my bathroom door. Now, it's just me, the dogs, and my boyfriend here. My boyfriend was across the hall laying in bed, and the dogs were with him. The voices I heard were clear as day. Two older gentlemen. Should we tell him? No, indistinct mumbling. They're in there. And the second voice did not reply. I obviously yanked the bathroom door open and looked to see who was in my hallway, but there was no one there. I listened for a few minutes, thinking maybe I heard the TV or something. I didn't hear anything. I call out and ask if my boyfriend said anything. He hollers back no, from where he's at in the bedroom. Okay, odd, but it's an old house. Maybe a loud commercial played and he turned the volume back down, no biggie. I go back to my nighttime routine, shut off the bathroom light, and now the hallway is dark. I'm gonna go to the bedroom. I bring my hand down from turning the light switch off, and my hand brushes up against a cold, rough-feeling hand, like someone with a lot of calluses on their hand. I know it was a hand. I felt the thumb and palm distinctly, like someone had reached out to grab my hand, but my movement kind of pulled out the grasp before they could actually grab my hand, if that makes sense. The hand came from behind, from in the bathroom. I obviously know there's no one in the bathroom, I just left the bathroom. And then I heard someone mumble from behind me, not exactly words, just kind of a voice, like someone grumbling under their breath. I jumped, turned the bathroom light back on, saw no one, left the light on, and hauled ass to the bedroom to tell my boyfriend what just happened because I was extremely freaked out. We checked out the entire house for an intruder, found no sign of any. Everything was locked up as usual. It's never happened again. I have no idea what it was. It's just a regular old creaky house. That's what I tell myself, at least. When I was around the ages 4 and 5, I would constantly see weird things in my bedroom at night. There would often be shadows on the wall talking to each other. It happened so often that I just took them to be normal occurrences. I saw all sorts of weird things at night, but the shadows were one of the things I saw most often. One night in particular, I was dreaming about being in a large landscape of rolling green hills. Dotting the hills were odd buffalo-type creatures. Something seemed off about them. They seemed unnatural, evil, and slightly monstrous. I started to get scared and woke up. Laying in my bed, I turned over and saw a horned shadow figure on the wall directly above my door. I tried to ignore it and flipped back over. I could feel it watching me. I kept flipping back, hoping it would be gone, but it was always there. It was staring and smiling. After a while, I couldn't take it anymore, so I started yelling for my mom. As soon as she came in, it vanished. I have no good way to explain the things that I saw as a child. There seemed to often be times of blurring between my dreaming state and awakened state, so I may have just had a very active and odd imagination to the point where I was truly hallucinating on a regular basis. When I was about 6 years old, I had had enough of the crap, so I remember opening the front door of our house and screaming, "Get out!" to everything that was bothering me. That's when my nights began to become more normal, and I eventually never had any more problems with them. Not sure if the scariest. I've most of my childhood blacked out, lol, but grew up for a while in this shitty apartment complex in a bad part of Cali, early 2000s. One night, my little kid self woke up in the middle of the night, went out to get something to eat, I think. Not really sure, but I'm guessing. Took one look to the living room. Huge, strange man is kneeling next to the TV. Big mustache. Has a gun. We just stare at each other. I slowly walk back into my room and go to sleep. Next morning, I tell my mom what happened, and she calls the police. The part no one believes is the dude took our fucking Wii. but not the little sensor thing that it needed to actually work. I was abducted into a house by my dad's friend. Long story short, my dad's friend was homeless and my dad was letting him sleep on the couch. I never thought anything about it, but I would go to my room with a towel on, but I'd usually pass by him on the couch. This would become a much bigger deal in the future. This guy kept going on about his daughters and how he wanted me to meet them. They were a couple years older, 14 to 16, but being a young kid, I figured I'd just meet new friends. He lived with us for a couple of months, until one day while walking to school, he calls me from across the street. I lived probably 1.5 kilometers from my house, but a straight shot and a pretty busy road. He ended up luring me into the house, saying his daughters lived there and they wanted to meet me. He literally gave me a tour of this house, but I kept asking him questions like where they were and who was their mom. He alluded that they were showering in the basement. Instantly, I felt a bad vibe. I just sat on the couch in the living room, refusing to go into the basement. I started panicking because I could see the time and knew I was late for school. At this point, he brings up that he thinks I'm coming onto him because I walked past him in a towel. I was so thrown by it, I just said no and told him I had to go. He asked for a hug and rubbed my thigh in a sexual way. I literally ran out the door. I was raised very old school and was so scared to get into trouble, I literally went back to school. When I went home, I told my parents, not realizing how big of a situation it was, and they called the police. I came to find out that wasn't even his daughter's house. He literally broke into a house on my way to school to lure me into. Even though the police were involved, and the guy literally left everything at a parent's and never came back. Years later, my parents befriend his brother, and eventually him again. And his brother kept denying that it ever happened, and my parents started questioning it too. LMAO. An out-of-body experience which I hope is never repeated. Almost crapped myself in fear. I was about 11, maybe younger, hard to remember, and was sick at school. In the nurse's station, called a sick room at my school, laying on the camp bed, feeling just generally weird. Looking out the very tall, thin windows that are typical of Victorian schools in the UK. Then I felt this strange, I can only call it a juke to the side, but mentally, and I saw myself outside the window, looking in, and at the same time I was looking out from the bed through the window at myself, floating outside. Apparently I yelled, but I don't remember that part. Then the nurse called my mom to pick me up, and I went home. I think I slept the rest of the day, but I have no clear memories of that part. When I was 7 or 8, I just got done watching an episode of FBI's Most Wanted, then went out onto the front porch to blow some bubbles. As I was doing this, I saw a guy run out of the neighbor's house and hide behind some bushes with a gun. Then I realized I hear police sirens getting closer, before they suddenly stop, before they get to my street. The guy looks over at me, makes the shh gesture, then runs across our lawn to the other neighbor's yard. To this day, and I swear to God this is true, I recognized his face as one of the guys on America's Most Wanted. Don't remember who. As far as I know, the cops didn't find him, and no one in my family believes that it happened. I was frozen in fear and shock until he ran out of my sight, at which point I ran back inside and told my parents what I saw. I don't blame them for not believing me, but at the very least, I did see a wanted criminal run across our yard that day. I almost drowned, choked to death. I was at the pools with my family and inhaled a lot of water by accident. I couldn't breathe and I couldn't cough it out. Panicked, I went to my sister to signal I was choking, and she thought I was being an idiot. I remember her looking at me and saying, "Ew, stop being a dickhead," or something along those lines. Went to my little brother, and he realized that I wanted him to whack me hard in the back. Coughed up all the water. Sister still doesn't believe me that she basically called me dying cringy. Back in the 90s, I was on the track team in high school. After school, we would run 5+ miles down the dirt road just on the outskirts of town because it was near the school. Around that time, there had been reports of a man in a white pickup that tried to kidnap a couple of girls walking home from school in our town. I wasn't feeling well one day and fell behind my teammates during one of our after-school runs. I'm running along this quiet dirt road when a white pickup slows down next to me. The guys started up with some friendly chit-chat about the weather and stuff. I was terrified but tried my best to appear calm and unsuspecting, all the while trying to plan my escape. He started asking me my name. I gave a fake one, age, where I lived, etc., and asked which way I was heading. I lied and told him I was going to head right at the turn up ahead and run a few more miles that way. The turn was actually the turnaround point, and then I would head back the way I came. He bid me a good day and drove on up ahead and turned right, where I told him I was heading. As soon as he disappeared around the corner, I turned around and ran faster than I ever had in my life. It was probably a good 2 miles back to the school. I kept looking behind me in case he came back that way, in which case I would run into the woods and hide until he passed. Thankfully, he never did come back that way. I always wonder if he was waiting somewhere along the false route to approach me again. I made it back and told my teammates about it, and they didn't believe me. They didn't exactly call me a liar, but I could tell they thought I was making it up, maybe because we had been talking earlier about hearing it in the local news. I caught a couple of them exchanging looks, and others barely responded at all. The more I tried to convince them, the more I sounded like I was clinging to a lie. I just dropped it and resigned to be thought a liar. Still pisses me off that nobody believed me. My coach didn't even seem to believe me. He just kind of shrugged it off. I should have told the police about it, but I was so ruffled about not being believed that I just let the whole thing go. I have many stories because I do cleansings for people and dabble in pagan practices. They all can be pretty wild, but the one most people have the hardest time understanding was witnessed by myself, mother, and sister. This occurred when I was 8, so 1998, small town in Alabama. My family had bought this house on the lake, a real haunted shit face. But hindsight, you know? Literally the second day of moving in, we experienced something. Also, this took place well before any dive into the occult. My family was non-denominational Christian. The house was 6 bedrooms, 4 baths, top and basement layout. We all had our rooms on the top floor. My room and my parents' room were the furthest down the hall. My sister was near the beginning, right across from the bathroom, so the hall wasn't super long, but my sister, who had decided to put like 14 to 15 family portraits up on the walls. They varied in size and weight. Now our mom was in the living room, which is what the hall opened to, so not far and certainly in sight of one another. Dad was gone, probably work or something. I was in my room putting up posters, nothing out of the ordinary, and it was midday. When my sister finished putting the pictures up, she came to get me to show me. She was proud of her work. We were right outside my room talking when we suddenly felt super uneasy. The atmosphere had changed. I didn't understand it at the time, but it was just heavy and difficult to think straight and breathe. Needless to say, our conversation halted. Even my mom felt it and stopped unpacking things. She turned to look at us. All of a sudden, we felt and heard this worship of wind go from my parents' room right in front of us down the hall. All those fucking pictures levitated off the wall and floated midair, resting in a horizontal position, parallel to the ground. We screamed and ran to our room. We were hysterical, as you can imagine. Mom said she was scared, but she had to be a mama bear and protect her babies. She said firmly, "Stop, you're scaring my children." She also told it to leave because it was not welcome here. Now, this part I didn't see because my face was buried into my mom's side as I was crying. She said the pictures all floated down and came to rest in their original spot. The ceiling seemed to just raise and become far away suddenly. My sister saw this too. I have no idea how else to explain it. The only ever described it this way, but the house became normal and still again like nothing had ever happened. My dad never believed it, despite all 3 of us experiencing that. Honestly, that was the most tame thing we experienced in the house. 7 years of hell we endured there. People who have experienced sleep paralysis. Can you tell us about those experiences? I had a period when I experienced that more often, many moons ago, now rarely. It's like your mind is fully awake, but you obviously can't move, so the fear sets in first. But you just calm down, and then I used to wake up from it. I kind of started rocking my body from left to right in my mind. That helped me to get the connection back and wake me up. Personally, I first experienced it around 8 years ago when I was 13. It's still possibly the most scary experience I've ever had in my life. I was in the garage, which was fitted into a bedroom/playroom. My mom and the rest of the family were on a trip, so it was just me and my dad in the house. I woke up and I was unable to move anything but my eyes. I couldn't even close my eyelids. From the door into the house, there was a shadow that started to appear. It kept on accumulating, and it eventually formed into the common shadow man figure. It was moving closer to me at the same time. Also, at the same time, a screaming started and grew louder as the shadow man came closer until it was right on top of me, and the screaming was intense. I just stared and prayed to God. At some point it just stopped. I slept in the same bed as my dad for the next 2 weeks. Has anyone else noticed that their sleep paralysis happens less or not at all when they sleep on their sides? Every single time I have had it happen, I was sleeping on my back, and I don't sleep on my back often. Sleep paralysis can be accompanied by hallucinations. Mine are very vivid. First time it happened to me, I saw Jawa from Star Wars at the end of my bed. Then one of the aliens from Signs crouching over me trying to strangle me. I swear if I ever see that crazy from The Ring, I will die of a heart attack. I'm a police officer who did a year on midnights, which is pretty much an expectation and requirement for newer officers on my department anyway. I cannot sleep during the day. I tried everything, I just can't. So, after about 9 months without any meaningful sleep, I was at work and saw a car that was clearly DUI. 4 a.m., no headlights, swerving all over the place. I spin around, get behind it, and put on my lights and chirp the siren to pull it over. Car takes off. It's a pursuit. I'm calling it out on the radio, doing the normal stuff. We go over the crest of a hill that's also on a curve. I slide out and wreck. My car flips over. I black out. I wake up and I'm trying desperately to get to my radio so I can call for medics. I can't move. I'm paralyzed. I move my eyes around and take in my surroundings. I'm not where I thought I was. Actually, this doesn't make sense. I see trees. Where I wrecked, there are no trees. I'm still struggling to reach my radio. I'm trying to move and I can't. Then I realize I just woke up. There was no pursuit. There was no accident. I just fell asleep for the first time in weeks and dreamed the whole thing. Slowly, very slowly, I regained control over my limbs. Fortunately, I realized what was happening before I could make my arm move to grab the radio. That was my first experience with sleep paralysis. I've since experienced it many times, but now I know the warning signs. Fuck midnight shift and fuck rotating schedules and fuck poor healthcare for first responders. Nobody should have to deal with this shit. For some reason it happened once, several years ago, and not yet again. I woke up, or so I thought. You know the first short moments after waking up where you perceive the visuals of the room peacefully without thoughts? Then usually you become aware of your to-do list or whatever, starting the thought process. Instead, when trying to roll over and change my position, I realized I couldn't move. I could look around, saw my body very sleepy as usual, otherwise unable to move. Another moment that felt like only a millisecond passed where I tried again with no success. Then I panicked, spent some time in what felt similar to a panic attack, pretty terrible, felt like 10 minutes but was probably a lot less. Then my vision became clear, wide awake, and I got up right away. The whole morning I was confused and thinking about what the hell happened, hoping it won't happen again. It always happens the same for me and at the same time. After I wake up in the morning and decide to fall back asleep. I'm fully aware I'm in my bed. My body is tingly and feels paralyzed. The worst part is once I fully fall into the sleep paralysis, a large, dark, demonic-like body appears at the foot of my bed, fully black with long arms, red eyes, and a skeleton-like hands. It will slowly move towards me as if it wants to grab and take me away. The best way to describe it is the dead kings from Lord of the Rings when Frodo puts the ring on. I fucking hate it. My wife says it looks like I'm having a seizure as I'm trying to jolt my body awake. During all of this, I do my best to scream, talk, anything. My wife hears nothing. I feel helpless. I always know when it's about to happen and will do my best to jolt my body awake before it goes too far. I have fully fallen into about 10 times in my life, maybe, and it's the same every time. 0 out of 10. Would not recommend. Okay, I've got one for you. Heads up, I told this story on a previous Ask Reddit. First, a little setup. One time, when I was a little kid, I got locked into my room by my piece of shit dad. It was right at sunset, and I remember watching the sunlight slowly scale up the wall as I was pleading to be let out of the room because I'm scared of the dark. I eventually gave up and sat down with my back on the door and started looking around the room. On the floor was a Batman game with little tokens with the characters' faces on them strewn about. I immediately focused on the face closest to me, which was the Joker token, and he has that crazy smile, but he also has this jester hat on with bells and the bells on his feet. The menacing face had never bothered me before, but with the sunlight leaving the room faster and faster, it started to get creepier and more grotesque. I also had the Alice in Wonderland sensation where I was getting really small, and that the token was getting bigger and bigger, until I was having a full-on panic attack. I stood up, back up, and turned back toward the door, screaming and jumping up to flip the lights on, grab the doorknob, but I was too short to reach either. I finally got let out of the room after what seemed like hours, and the room had gone completely dark. Fast forward, now I'm 23. I have this weird fucking dream where I'm in an art school. I never went to art school, human brain is just weird, and my professor wants to show me some art he has done. He hands me a stack of papers, and the one on top is a rough pencil sketch of a generic-looking face of a man. I flip to the next one, and the next, and the drawings get darker and more detailed, the face getting twisted and sinister. I'm frantically flipping page after page at this point in horror. The paper is falling all around my feet and covering the floor, until I land on the final page, and it's the fucking Joker face from the token when I was a little kid. I look down, and I am now swimming in thousands of the same painting of the Joker's face, and I eventually get submerged under all the papers and drown. I wake up from my dream in a fucking hot sweat, and feel unbelievable relief from discovering it was all just a dream. But something is wrong. I can't move my body, but my eyes are totally open, and I'm able to see my room. I've had sleep paralysis before, so I know that's what's going on. And just as I'm about to start breathing slow to calm myself down and wait it out, I hear a noise. I hear my bedroom window being slowly slid open. I try to turn my head to look at the window, but I'm frozen in place. Then, I hear someone lift themselves up onto the windowsill and then jump down into my room. And as soon as their feet land, I hear the fucking jingle from the bells on his jester hat and shoes. At this point, I know that it's the Joker who's in my room, and I start trying to yell at the top of my voice, but all I get is a muffled grunt because my mouth won't open. I can hear the Joker laughing at me as I try yelling and moving my body again and again. Finally, after about the 5th try, I get my mouth to open, and I let out a ridiculous scream that woke up all my roommates, and one of them came in my room, and right as they flipped on the light, the Joker disappeared. Then, and I could move again. I usually see a figure made of dim light, like a light shadow, if that makes sense. The entity approaches me slowly and puts one hand on my chest. Lasts some minutes, but I can feel the pressure of his hand even after I regained my senses and my movement. Scary shit. When I was a teen, I believed that was an actual ghost. Dude, okay. So I love talking about this because it was real as fuck and scary as hell. So I'm sleeping like normal when all of a sudden my bed is shaking. I think it's an earthquake. I open my eyes and there are 3 figures with red oars literally lifting my bed by the foot and shaking it, moaning in dissonance. It's not a dream because I'm fully awake and everything in my room is normal besides the demons. My heart races, body immobile, can't move or speak at all. Now I've heard of sleep paralysis before, so immediately I'm closing my eyes and repeating to myself that it isn't real. After a few minutes, everything dissipates. But yeah, weird as fuck. Only happened one time, but it's something I won't forget. It started happening to me after a friend committed suicide. I was in the middle of nursing school, working night shifts as a nurse tech, and all those stressors made me a giant anxious mess. I was sleeping for my night shift, and my mind awoke, but my body did not. My room was pitch black despite it being daytime, and I swore I saw my friend who had just passed standing in the corner, but he didn't feel like a wanted presence. His presence was evil and his intent ill. I started heavily panicking. I couldn't move and I couldn't cry out, and I wasn't even sure if my eyes were open, and I was seeing this or if I was dreaming it. I'm still not so sure. Since then, the sensation came back a few more times before I figured out what it was, that it wasn't just me. My triggers for it are stress and, of course, lack of sleep. I can't nap during the day. That's almost guaranteed to bring it on. Now, when it happens, I can make myself calm down after a bit and force myself back to real sleep. If it happens when my kids are in the house, it's way worse. The evil/terrifying presence, no longer my friend, just a shadow figure, feels like it's threatening them, and I can't stop it. Fucking wild shit, y'all. I will say it hasn't happened since I tried microdosing during lockdown. It was the most horrific thing I've ever experienced. It was sunny, midday, and I was laying down on my bed reading. Now for context, bedroom door is right next to the staircase, the stairs being directly against my bedroom wall. You come up the stairs, make an immediate U-turn, and my bedroom door is right on the landing, so you can't see who is coming up the stairs, but you can definitely hear it. I'm laying on my bed, and all of a sudden I'm filled with dread, like the most ominous sense of foreboding I've ever felt in my life. The only thought in my head is, it's coming. Then I heard creaking on the steps and indistinct whispers. Alarms are going off in my head, telling me to move, right now, but I couldn't. All I could do is lay there, staring in dread at my doorway while the slow creaking got louder and the whispers got closer. I knew for an absolute fact that whatever it was got to my doorway, something bad was going to happen. I could sense that whatever it was at the landing and I was at peak panic, but right before it could come into my line of sight, it all stopped. It felt like I blinked, although I'm not sure if I did or not. The whispering was gone, the dread was gone, and I could move again. That was the second time it happened to me, the first being in the basement at night, which you'd think would be worse. But there's something so disturbing about sleep paralysis happening in the middle of a bright sunny day with birds chirping. And every time I get sleep paralysis, it's the same thing. Realizing that something is coming for me, hearing indistinct garbled whispers getting louder inside my own head, and waking up right before whatever this dreaded presence is comes around a corner. It's literally the most horrifying thing I've ever gone through. The really horrifying part is that every time it happens, it gets closer before I wake up, which leaves me terrified that the next time it happens, I may literally die. LMAO, I love it. I've experienced sleep paralysis once, and I had an extremely positive experience. I also knew what it was and that hallucinations are likely to happen in this state. I'm big on psychedelics and like to lucid dream, so I've always wanted to experience sleep paralysis. When it did happen, I remembered to remain calm and to focus on my breathing, letting positive thoughts take over, and from that point I slipped into a lucid dream. I understand that it is normally a horrible experience because most people don't know what is happening and have no expectations when they find themselves locked in. It's scary, and it's fear that manifests the waking nightmares. But if you know what is happening and you're aware that you're safe, then it is the most perfect opportunity to do anything. Controlling your hallucinations is basically only possible when in sleep paralysis. Happened in December, seemingly out of nowhere. Went to bed and gradually heard a buzzing sound in my ears that got louder. At the same time, it got darker in my room, which is something that freaked me out more than the buzzing because a decent amount of light outside comes through my closed blinds. As soon as this started happening, I could glimpse what looked like a humanoid figure swooping down on me, and the sensation felt as if this thing was pinning me down with its weight. Didn't really have a face. Closest comparison I can think of is a Dementor from Harry Potter. Thankfully, the whole situation lasted for about 30 seconds. I was able to wiggle my feet, which ended the darkness and paralysis feeling. A couple of weeks later, while staying over at my mom's house in the basement, I experienced something similar. No apparition, but the same buzzing sound and inability to move. And after conversing with a couple of family members, one of my sisters chimed in and stated that she encountered similar experiences multiple times while sleeping in the basement. So apparently, there's something in the basement, which never materialized in the past 20 plus years of living there, nor does it explain my prior encounter at my own apartment, both fascinating and terrifying at the same time. Unlike others, I don't have a visual component to my sleep paralysis. When it happens to me, I just wake up, but have no physical control of my body. My eyes are still closed, but I can hear everything going on around me. I cannot move my body. I can't open my eyes. Before I knew what it was very scary. I thought I was going to be trapped like that forever. Now, while still unsettling, I do not freak out. I know I will eventually snap out of it, though sometimes I still get a little tinge of fear that maybe this time I won't. Similar to another person, I mentally rock back and forth and try to get parts of my body to move. Eventually it happens and life is normal. Other times I try to go back to sleep and hope I wake up normally after that. It's really only scary the first time or two it happens. After that, you know what it is and that it will work itself out. At least for me. Might be different if you get visual hallucinations too. Has happened to me a few times, but the best one, I'm high and laying in my bed listening to Black Rainbow by St. Vincent. My lamp is on, so my room is illuminated. At some point I doze off, but don't realize it because what I see and hear in my sleep is exactly what I was seeing and hearing before, me laying in my bed listening to Black Rainbow. A dark figure opens my door. I try to get up but can't. It slowly walks over to me, all while the song is hitting a very dissonant crescendo. I'm in full-on panic mode, but still can't move. Right as the figure reaches my bed, I wake up and sit up, sweaty and heart pounding, and everything is the same as in the dream, except the figure is gone and the song had just finished. Experienced it twice so far in my life, but the second one I remember vividly. I had to have been about 13 at the time. I remember waking up on my back, not being able to move my arms or legs. I tried speaking but couldn't do that either. I glanced around the room with my eyes, trying to see what time it was, when I saw something move in my peripheral. The way my room was set up was that I could go to my right from my bed, down a short space to the bathroom. Well, in my peripheral, I could see a dark figure peek its hand out and grab the edge of the open doorway. I panicked and tried my best to move or scream or something. I eventually woke up scared shitless at just what happened. Not sure if this is exactly sleep paralysis, but a few years ago my friend and I were hanging out and watching a horror movie as friends do. When it was over, I went home and it took a while for me to fall asleep. I dreamt of the exact experience of me watching the movie with my friend, but looking on from a third-person point of view. And when I left to get a ride from my friend home that night, we were attacked by a man with a chainsaw. I immediately woke up, but instead of bolting upright, I stared up into the ceiling, and floating above me was the face of the chainsaw-wielding man staring right back at me. I blinked a few times, frozen with fear, each time making him fade more and more until he disappeared, and I never questioned it until I woke up the following day. Happens almost predictably to me when I'm overstressed, anxious, or haven't slept for a while. When I was a kid, it was terrifying. I had dreams of demons devouring my body, wraiths, ghosts chasing me and possessing my body, shadowy figures that would open the door into my room and steadily approach my bed. There was even one where I thought I actually died because the shadowy wisp felt like it was drinking the soul out of me, like a dementor. Each one left me paralyzed for a few seconds, unable to breathe and struggling to yell for help with nothing but my exasperated exhalations. Nowadays, I've gotten so acclimated to them that I know when it's going to happen and am able to break out of it if I want. The thing is, I kind of look forward to them, as I've learned from my experience that sleep paralysis can kind of lead into the most lucid of dreams where you feel a heightened sense of everything. If I really want to set off a few episodes, the trigger for me is to set alarms every 1.5 to 2 hours during my sleep to interrupt my REM cycle and increase the chances of sleep paralysis when I fall asleep again. It's necessary to be able to fall asleep quickly for this, however. It happens in the early stages of falling asleep. Your mind will suddenly wake up, but your body doesn't. You're fully aware but can't move. Then your mind starts playing tricks on you. For me, it was always a sensation of someone hovering over me or scuffling around the edges of my bed, and a few times I could have sworn I heard my bedroom door open first or even felt something push my foot. Even once it's happened enough that you know what's going on, it's still terrifying. I eventually learned to break out of it by concentrating on moving extremities, like just a finger. Once the finger was moving, I could quickly work up my hand and arm, and as soon as I could turn my head and open the eyes, the sensation would vanish. What is your scariest altercation that ever happened to you? This was a very one-sided altercation. I tried to talk 3 or 4 college football players out of abducting my 2 female friends in a parking lot. One of the girls knew the football players, the other didn't. The guys were extremely drunk and pretty vocal about pulling a train, etc. One of my friends was actually screaming rape while being restrained in the back seat of the football player's car. A big linesman backed me against the wall to keep me out of the way. I'm 6'2", 225, but he was much bigger and much taller. I complied until he walked away to get in the car. I followed him back to the driver's window to once more try to defuse the situation and get my friends back. I just bent over to talk to the driver when he slammed the door open enough to tear my shirt and cut me open. I'm a little unclear of the sequence of events, but I guess he didn't get out of the car, as my next recollection is being clotheslined by the driver through the window of the car. Boom, back of the hand and forearm to the temple. I just dropped. I woke up to someone asking if I was okay. The car was gone with my friends. I had to hitchhike home as I'd ridden with the girls and went to sleep planning ways to bomb the football players' dorm. My friends called in the morning. The shitbag football players had pushed them out of the car on the way home because they screamed and fought so much in the middle of nowhere, but they got home safe. I still spent the rest of the day ready to off some athletes, and the pain from the punch lingered for a few days, but I eventually cooled off. This is a prime example of 1970s Southern football culture. The athletic department covered up rapes and assaults far more damaging than mine on the regular. Weird guy started talking to me on the train, started telling me that he was homeless, that he's an orphan. I'm waiting for the part where he starts asking for money, when he starts telling me about all the places where he hangs out and does various drugs. He does all the drugs: pot, coke, heroin, meth. I almost didn't believe him, and it's probably not true, but he kept acting all weird. He said he likes my shoes and wanted to trade shoes with me. He even took off his own shoes and handed them over. Of course, I refused to even touch them. It's all weird until I get to my stop. I told him I have to go, and he jumps up and asks for my phone number. I tell him I don't have time and walk away. I think he's sitting back down, but I catch him out of the corner of my eye getting up and exiting the train. At this point, the alarms are ringing in my head. It's around 6 p.m., so it's not nighttime yet, not completely dark, but I had to walk a little bit to get to my car, which was parked at the opposite end of a parking lot. I do the thing where I put my car keys between my fingers in case I need to punch him. I try to avoid looking back because I don't want him to know that he's following me, but I can hear his footsteps, so I pick up the pace. I don't really understand what his plan was, but I get to my car safely. I drive away, and I see him walking back into the train station, probably to take the train to his actual destination. It was this fight with a kid in the neighborhood, and he kept saying he was going to kill me, but it was the 80s. Everyone seemed to say shit like that. Other kids pulled us apart, and the guy went home crying. A couple of minutes later, we're all still standing around when the dude comes back with a metal baseball bat, runs up to one of the kids who pulled him off of me, winds up and crashed the bat down with full force on the side of the kid's knee, breaking it badly. It was horrifying, and we basically all ran away in terror as he proceeded toward us. Oh boy, it's my time to shine. It was 2 a.m. I was walking home from work when someone steps out of an alleyway to block my path. It was my own fault. I didn't see him coming as I had headphones in. The following exchange was the closest I've ever come to needing fight or flight. He wondered if he could ask me a question. I was expecting him to ask to use my phone or for change, but boy, I wasn't ready for what he said. Hypothetically, if someone was on the run from the police for doing something bad, like really bad, and they needed money, would you be upset if they hurt you to get it, or would you understand? They're really desperate, and they don't mean it, but they could really do some damage. Like they wouldn't kill you, but you wouldn't be able to recognize them again. Now, he said this with no sense of irony or humor about him. He was deadly serious and hadn't taken his hand out of his pocket, so I was expecting a knife and knew I had to think fast. My response was to keep telling him that I'm not a grass. So if I saw this guy, I wouldn't say a word to anyone about it, and I'd rather just give him money than have to fight and risk the guy getting caught. He started muttering that it was an acceptable answer, and after I gave him 10 pounds, he vanished back into the night. I have no idea if he was telling the truth or lying, but at 2 a.m., I damn sure didn't want to find out. The only other time was when I was buying some of Colombia's finest export, and the guy wanted to show me the gun he just bought and pointed it at me, saying I was police. He then fell about laughing, but for about 2 seconds I thought I was going to die. Didn't see him again. I was once followed back home in the dark by a man because I refused to give him money when I was entering a convenience store. I believe he intended to hurt me, probably stab me. As I entered a dark alley with no one else in sight, he came around the corner behind me saying, "I can't believe you wouldn't give me no money, man." I told him to leave me alone and kept walking. He then started to sprint towards me, and in response I dropped my bag and spun around, drawing my pistol from its holster and racking around into battery. He was maybe 8 feet from me. "Not a step closer," I said. "Leave me alone." He started laughing, turned away from me, and walked back from where he came. It was the closest I'd ever come to killing a man. The adrenaline didn't go away for hours. Not really scary, but kind of creepy. Maybe 6 or so years ago, I was in my backyard picking up dog poop, and this guy sees my dog and comes up to the fence and starts talking to me, saying he lives in the apartment behind our house. I was 19 at the time, and this guy looks like he's in his 60s or so. He's petting my dog over the fence and is asking me questions about her. Then he starts hitting on me and asking if he can take me to the bowling alley down the street sometime. I was getting creeper out, so I said I needed to go back to picking up poop, and he left. 2 days later, he rings my doorbell asking for money for food. I had no money, so I just gave him some leftover pizza, which I found in the yard later that night. I was in my trailer that I was renting while I was in college. I hear a bunch of screaming outside and look out the window to see a dude absolutely beating the shit out of some poor woman. I called 911 and reported it, but I legit thought this guy was going to kill her. I grabbed my shotgun, unloaded it, and went outside. I was just hoping to scare him enough to get him off of her until the cops showed up. There was no way I was going to be able to fight him. He was a huge dude. So I got out, walk up within 20 feet or so, rack the shotgun, and tell him to leave her the fuck alone. He stops beating on her and starts yelling at me, calling me a fucking pussy with a gun. He keeps threatening to come at me anyways, saying I don't have the balls to shoot him. I couldn't have anyways, but I suppose I could have hit him with it. Finally, the cops show up after the longest 5 minutes or so of my life. I set the shotgun down and put my hands on my head as one of them immediately comes to me and cuffs me. The woman is trying to explain what happened, and eventually the other guy gets arrested as well. That was the most scared I've ever been in my life. I immediately started bawling in the back of the cruiser. For my effort, I got slapped with brandishing a firearm in a threatening manner and a few other things. Luckily, everything eventually got dropped, but not until after it made my life a living hell for several months. Hockey trainer that was new to the team molested me after a game while I was bent over my hockey bag undressing and putting clothes on. I had a band shirt that I absolutely loved and he wanted to read the back of the shirt, so he got behind me and he grabbed my hips. I felt everything, then reached around and started fondling me. All the while, some of the other teammates were undressing and internally I'm screaming, but I can't do anything, almost frozen. I really don't know if the other guys knew what was going on or if they were just as shocked. This was in the mid-90s, and this was the second time I've ever told this story. First time was to my therapist I started going to about 2 weeks ago. I just want to feel normal again. I've had some trauma happen the past year or two, and just right now I'm having a super hard time with everything. Seems like my life is just done. Like I have nothing else to offer. Does that make sense? Anyways, that was one of my scariest altercations. I've had many more, but that one sticks out for obvious reasons. Stay safe, everyone. I was robbed 4 times working at a gas station. Once at sock point, dude looked crazy and I'm not messing with that. The other times were at gunpoint. Once pressed to my back, once pointed over the counter in my direction, and once over the counter but aimed right at my head the whole time. I feel like I'm missing one, but don't recall anything other than the sandwich shop was still closing down and the girl working there was terrified and felt guilty for just hiding. She did the right thing, as I frequently assured her. It was around my 16th birthday at the time. I'm 19 now. I had recently been living with family friends because my parents did not want me home alone. He was a cool guy, 2 years older than me, and he would always leave the house late at night and come back a few hours later very tired and seemingly drunk. One day it was like 1 a.m. and I was watching Family Guy on the downstairs TV and I hear a loud thumping coming from outside the house. I get a little scared and just see the door get slammed down and my friend grabbing me by the arm and yanking me out of my seat and telling me, "We gotta get out quick." I had no idea what was going on and kept asking, "WTF, where are we going?" And he kept saying, "I'll explain later, run, quickly." We get a few blocks away from the house and we get to his aunt's house. And from his aunt's house, you had a very clear view of his backyard and we saw people rummaging around the house, breaking glass, stealing stuff, and they had guns in their hands. Apparently, he had gotten in a weird altercation with a rivaling gang and they were chasing him down. If not for him, I would easily been dead. Thanks, Kareem. My now ex-husband and I were arguing. He had already slapped and shoved me. I got to where I was on the other side of the dining room table from him. I had no place else to go and nothing I could use to defend myself. He pulled out a Bowie knife and started screaming at me that he was going to kill me. He stabbed it into the table several times, still just screaming profanities at me and tried to throw the table at me. I kept trying to talk to him calmly and I was for real pissed myself. I was absolutely convinced that I was going to get killed. He had choked me out before, broken a bowl over my head, had stitches, amongst other things. This was the first time he came at me with a weapon. It was terrifying, and I've been through a lot. I divorced him shortly after this because I found out he was cheating on me with an actual crack whore, but that was the real beginning of the end. I still have the table though. One really hot night, I got off work at my brewery and on the way home realized I didn't have any cold beer. I have a warm 12-pack from work in my car though. I pull into the gas station next to my exit and walked in to grab a 12-pack of PBR. I'm in line and the dude in front of me is getting PBR too. And just as his transaction ends, it's 12:01, so cashier won't sell beer after midnight. I'm like, what the fuck? The cashier's like, I'm sorry, it's tied into the computer system, so I literally can't sell you this. Guy ahead of me hears this and is all smug as fuck. And like, how much is this 12-pack worth to you? Now, my entire argument with this guy is, if you sell me this beer, what are you gonna drink? And I'm trying to explain to him that, hey, I work at a brewery. I got fresh but warm beer in my car. I'll give you 3 warm beers for every cold beer. Dude's not having it and gets kind of aggressive. I finally tell him, fine dude, no need to get fucking aggro. Take your beer and fuck off and leave. I'm at my car and hear the door ring and look up to see the dude come out. He's storming. I can tell he's pissed. I'm a head taller than him, but he's fucking roided out. He's yelling at me to watch my fucking mouth. I hold my hands up, apologize to the dude, try to explain my point of view again, and hold my hand out for a handshake. Dude decks me in the jaw and drops me. Glad I didn't break nothing. Fuck that guy. I was working as a customer service counter in college, and a kid tried to return a video game system that he had broken. Since he admitted that it wasn't defective and that he broke it, we obviously wouldn't take it as a return and give him his money back. He said he would be back at closing to kill me. About 20 minutes before closing, our store manager saw him sitting in a car in the parking lot with a couple of other guys, so she called the cops. They chased him off and stayed to escort me to my car and follow me to the interstate to ensure my safety. The manager told me to take a week off to make sure he doesn't show back up again. I was driving on a major highway at night with two other guys and the girlfriend of one of the guys in a convertible. Some dudes started swerving towards us and basically forced us off the road into the median, then hopped out of their car, totally unprovoked. We started figuring out who takes who as they approached us and trying to decide how to get out of the situation. I saw a car coming and tried to flag it down. Turns out it was a state trooper. Total luck. He found a couple of bats in their cars. He took them down all our info, called for a second car, and sent us on our way. We have no idea what happened to them. I was probably 10 or 11 at the time. I'm almost 27 now, and I got home from school before my grandma got home from work. She usually looked after me after school, but had to stay late for some reason. So I'm home alone. We lived in the country on a farm, with my dog watching Star Wars, and I hear someone walking on our deck. I hid under the coffee table, listening as they walked around the house, before I heard them loudly banging on the door and screaming stuff. I ran into my dad's room and called him, but he was 45 minutes away and would take a bit to get home. So he told me to take my dog and run to the neighbor's house across the street and to stay there until he got home. So I quietly leashed my dog, ran out the front door and down to the neighbor's house, but they weren't home. I was full on panicking and crying at this point because I was scared I was going to get murdered by whoever was trying to break into my house. So I ran to the other neighbor's house and they didn't answer either. By this point, it had been about 45 minutes. So I went back home and saw my driveway full of cop cars. I went inside and my dad was home and I had to give a statement to the cops about it before they left. It was pretty horrifying for a 10 to 11-year-old girl. When I was 13, my friends and I used to sit and eat snacks on staircases of private properties. My dumbass friends at the time thought it'd be funny to take a potted plant off the staircase we were sitting on and hide it behind a car, but he ended up dropping it and spilling the dirt everywhere. The owner came out, this huge-ass super American dude, at least 6'3" and like 300 pounds, yelling and screaming at all of us, even me and my other friend who tried to verbally stop him. The owner of the houses ended up chasing us down a block, yelling profanities and shit. He also yanked a bag of chips from my hand and threw them super fucking hard into the road. I don't blame him, but I'm still scared shitless when I pass that house, and I miss those chips. 2 stories to tell. First one, I was 15, walking home at 2 a.m.ish from a friend's party. I lived at the top of the hill, she lived at the bottom. Takes me all of 15 minutes to get home. About halfway up, even though I'm stoned and drunk, I noticed I'm being followed, and very poorly at that. Guy was pulling into driveways just out of reach, 4 driveways up, and when I'd get close enough to touch the car, he'd pull out and go a few driveways up and repeat. So young teenager me was very mad and scared this guy thought he could bother trying to prevent me from getting to my bed potentially. So I waited till I was close enough to the car, eyed a rock from a driveway, and did what any sensible person would do. I ran, jumped on the hood, and smashed his window and side mirrors as he pulled out and tried to drive away. Sadly, it wasn't over. At this point, I ran and took a turn up a side street and hid in the brush by a house. He drove around a bit and then dipped. He was caught a few weeks later trying to get a teenage girl to help him find his puppy. When they tried to walk away, he went for a girl but no dice, and he was reported and found. The car was easy to find as it didn't have a left side mirror and badly dented hood. Ah, karma. Second one is super my fault, kind of. Young and dumb, lol. So, I'm gonna keep the details limited. Me and BF of the time, both 16 to 17, can't remember exactly, and our mutual friend, about 7 of us, wanted E, so we go out. So, when we found these 2 guys, me and BF went to check it out. I was an avid drug user at the time, nothing hard, and always had a knife the length of my forearm up my sleeve for protection and never used. Seems stupid, but it's important to note. Right away, I see Advil scratched to look like it something and say, nope, Grab BF, he hands back the guy's stuff. Then the guy gets all upset before we can leave the alley and pulls out a gun, aims for the BF. Without thought, yet again young and dumb, I have my knife to the guy's neck and we're all in a standstill. I ask the guy what he wants to do next and his buddy's like, hey man, let's dip. He thinks it's over and we both drop our shit slowly and walk away. They knew we had people with us, not 20 feet away, even if we're dumbass kids. What a night that was. We eventually did find some E laced with acid, lol, good times, them days, but I'm glad they're done. Not exactly an altercation, but I thought it was. During spring break, my husband and I, both small town people, were shopping at a large mall in Florida with our toddler. We got back to our car in the lot, and I carefully strapped my child into her car seat in the back. In those days, car seats were more cumbersome to use. I turned around to see a young woman standing in front of my husband holding up something that I thought was a gun. My rapid thoughts were that we would all be killed by a robber and that there was no way I could quickly unstrap my child and make a run for it. I could feel the adrenaline rush. My husband said something to the man and he walked away, to my great and happy surprise. Immediately I asked for an explanation and it turned out the man was a beggar of sorts. He wasn't holding up a pistol, he was showing a card that said something like, I'm deaf, I need money. Fortunately, he laughed when my husband declined to share.
What is the most creepy, unexplained event that has happened in your life? Me, my boss, and a coworker were standing at the surface table measuring something when the quarter-ton table moved about 6 inches at one corner across the concrete floor with a loud screech like someone had grabbed it and moved it out of the way. We just looked at each other like, did that just happen? My uncle used to have a cabin in the woods near Winter, Wisconsin on a relatively undeveloped arm of the Chippewa flowage. Not too remote that you couldn't pop into town for necessities, but far enough in the boonies that if you got hurt, you'd be in serious trouble. I used to spend time there in the summer, tearing through the woods with my 2 cousins. One morning, when I was about 10, my uncle woke us up roughly and told us it was time to go fishing. It was still super early, and we were all confused because it was pitch dark, and who the hell went fishing so early anyway? He hustled us down to the dock, where he kept his little fishing boat, and quickly launched us into the water and away from the house. At this point, we were all getting a little freaked out by the weirdness of the situation. We thought maybe we were being punished because my uncle had gone to chop wood the previous morning and couldn't find his axe anywhere. He'd left it lodged in a stump next to the cabin and accused us of messing with it, which, to be fair, sounded like something we probably would have done. He ended up having to drive into town to buy a new one. He wasn't talking though. We just sat, shivering under a blanket at the bow of the boat, while my uncle stared wild-eyed at the shoreline and waved a flashlight furtively ahead of us. We eventually arrived at my uncle's friend's cabin across the lake and tumbled into his house. Our uncle sent us to the loft to sleep, and he and his buddy locked the doors and left, not returning until well after sunrise. Eventually, our uncle showed up with the truck and trailer already packed with all of our gear and told us it was time to go home. We all thought it was weird that we were leaving the cabin days early, but we were kids, so we just went with it. My uncle was quiet for the whole long drive back to civilization. Many years later, my uncle confirmed to me that the reason he'd hustled us home was because he'd woken up at around 3 a.m. to a strange thok 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 sound from outside the cabin. He'd gone out to investigate when a massive jack pine fell directly across the narrow driveway, blocking us in. Startled by the noise, he swept his flashlight along the tree line just in time to see a man holding an axe slink away into the dark of the wood. He and his buddy had to take turns chainsawing the tree apart while the other stood watch with a rifle. He never found the axe. From my old account, driving in rural areas in New England near the borders of Vermont and Massachusetts, so I'm not sure which one I was in. It was late. Well, okay. So late it was actually early, and there was fog, dense fog, like Silent Hill levels of fog. And like an idiot who dies in the opening scene of a horror movie, I'm driving on back roads. First, my headlights just up and go out. Cannot use high beams because of fog. I'm in the middle of nowhere. I haven't seen a house or town in a long time. Car starts making noise. Check engine light comes on. So I pull over, nothing much around, field and fog and dark. Creepy as hell. I gamely look at the engine. I can fix electronics, not engines. I tighten all the things I know. Car now won't start. So I'm in the dark, in the middle of nowhere, on the side of the road. Because of the natural rules of how things work, my cell phone has no service as well. It is like one big cliche, but I'm not stupid enough to go wandering the roads right now. So I recline my seat and decide to take a nap for a couple of hours until the sun comes up. I wake up, the sun is coming up, the fog is going away, and I am on the main street of a tiny town, parked in front of what looks like the Bates Motel house. Houses everywhere. It was the creepiest feeling. I was sure I'm off in the woods. There was not a light on any house all night. There was a service station 50 yards up the road. I walked up to it, talked to the guy who looked perfectly normal. He walked over to look at the car, asked me to try and start it, and it did. Fucking thing turned over right away, and both headlights were working. I drove on, never got the name of the little village, and I couldn't find it on a map. I always felt like I was in this big setup for a horror movie that just didn't pan out. I saw a guy accidentally drop a 16-inch concrete drill bit from shoulder height. It never hit the ground. It's like it stopped existing on its way to the floor. No sound of it hitting the floor, nowhere to go, just gone. 3 witnesses all saw the same thing. This happened in a completely empty, newly constructed building. Hallway was tiled, walls were cinder block, newly installed drop ceiling. We had to fill out a missing tool report, got written up for it, had to search the entire building top to bottom for hours. I'm a very skeptical person. I can't come up with any reasonable explanation for it. Still think about it when questions like this come up. Sometimes things can just disappear, I guess. This didn't happen to me, but to a friend. He had a doctor's appointment and took his dad with him. It was in another town and about an hour away, and since the appointment was for 11 a.m., they left at 9:30 to give themselves plenty of time. They pulled into the parking lot at 10:30. My friend said he remembered checking the clock in the car when they arrived and remarking to his dad that they made good time. They went into the office, and the receptionist pointed out that they were a little late, but that it was okay because the doctor was running behind. My friend told her that he had an 11 o'clock appointment and that he was actually a half hour early, and she pointed to the clock on the waiting room wall, which said 11:15. His dad checked his watch, 11:15. My friend ran out and checked the clock in the car, 11:15. Somehow, in the few dozen steps from the car to the office, they'd lost 45 minutes. When they got home, my friend's mom verified that they'd left home at 9:30, and there hadn't been heavy traffic or delays of any kind. It's a mystery to this day. One time when I was younger, I was upstairs in my room playing some games on a PlayStation. I was home alone because both of my parents had gone out to see a movie. It was a fairly normal night with nothing out of the ordinary happening until I heard an extremely loud crashing noise and what sounded like glass shattering coming from the kitchen area. I immediately went downstairs to try and see the source of the noise. I checked all of the windows and showed no signs of damage. Confused, I kept walking around, trying to find the source of this loud crashing noise until I walked over to the kitchen. I don't know how this happened, but apparently the outer glass screen of our oven just completely fell off and shattered. Slightly terrified, I proceeded to sweep up all of the glass and throw it away. I tried explaining the situation to my parents when they got home, but they didn't believe my story and grounded me for a week because they thought I broke it. To this day, I still have no clue what caused the oven screen door to shatter like that, and it's one of the biggest unexplained mysteries in my life. My dad and stepmother got married when I was 10 years old at a countryside estate which is now a wedding venue. The other kids and I were playing hide and seek in this massive house, every kid's dream, when my sister, 12 at the time, was chasing my younger cousin, 7 at the time, who had long blonde hair, wearing a blue dress down a long hallway. Halfway down the hallway, the younger cousin dips into an old spiral staircase that only goes up a quarter rotation before it's blocked off with a wall. My sister jumps around the corner and shouts, "Gotcha!" Except nobody was in the blocked staircase. She runs back to my dad crying, saying that her cousin disappeared through a wall, and everyone laughed it off because said cousin was right next to her. Fast forward 5 years. I'm 15 and I get a job as a waiter at the same wedding venue. The estate has an RNG, which is where they hold the ceremonies, and I notice a small stained glass window depicting a blonde-haired girl wearing a blue dress with the dates 1931 to 1937 underneath her. Naturally, I'm dumbfounded, so I ask about the stained glass window. The venue manager tells me that after being sold by the original owner, the estate was a boarding school for girls. She tells me that a young girl fell out of a top-floor window and sadly passed away. The hallway that my sister chased my cousin down was an old servant's hallway, and the staircase was the central staircase that leads directly up to the old girls' dormitories on the top floor. Spooky. Learned a lot about the house during my 5 years working there. Nothing else spooky, but plenty that is very, very interesting. Weirdest thing I've ever experienced. I live in a small town, and it takes 3 hours and 4 mountain passes to get to the nearest city. Pre-COVID, I made that drive 2 to 3 times a month over a period of 10 years. I pretty much had the curves and climbs committed to memory. One night, I'm making the drive at 2 a.m. to catch an early flight, cruising the curves and enjoying the lack of semi-trucks. Left curve, right curve. No, there's a big sweeping curve to the left coming up, when all of a sudden, I'm driving on a straight road. I'm well aware that there isn't a straight section on that highway for another 30 miles. So immediately, I'm looking around trying to figure out where the hell I am. Not a single highway sign on the side of the road. Smacked myself a few times to make sure I hadn't fallen asleep. Phone has no service, but that's normal, so I can't check my location. Looking out the window, I realize the high desert scrub trees have been replaced with a thick forest. Imagine your headlights pick up dark, heavy, can't see 10 feet forest that I would imagine in the Pacific Northwest, something that we don't have here. I'm looking at the clock, and for 15 minutes, I'm driving on a straight road through this ominous dark forest when I should be on a curvy mountain pass in the desert. Right about the time I'm going to have a full-on panic attack, the sweeping left curve appears, and I'm out of the forest back in the scrub. So I chalked it up to drowsy driving and an overactive imagination until it happened again. 2 years later, same spot, except this time I'm not alone. I had my brother riding shotgun on a similar airport run, and all of a sudden I'm on the straight road. That time it only lasted about 5 minutes before my brother looked around and asked, "Where the hell are we?" Cue the sweeping left curve appearing and back in the desert. Even though I can't explain it, I'm at least grateful I had a witness. I work for a funeral company. One afternoon I did a viewing for a man who was having his funeral the next day. Usually at the end of the day we put the bodies back in the fridge, but because we've been really busy and I was a small branch, we only had a very small fridge and it was already full, so on the rare occasion, if they've been embalmed, we'll leave them in the chapel with the air conditioner cranked up because we have good security systems and who wants to break into a funeral home anyway? So the next morning, I'm the first one in, and I walk into the chapel, and the man is out of his coffin, laying face down on the floor. Not sprawled, but perfectly neat, like he'd floated up out of his coffin, turned face down, and floated down to the ground. Obviously, I had a heart attack, and my first thought was someone had broken in and done this, or were staff members playing a prank. A very sackable prank, and I can't imagine any of our staff doing that for any reason. And what's more, we have security cameras and motion detectors and swipe cards so you can see who has come and gone, but there was nothing. According to the security, no one came in or left that night. Unfortunately, or fortunately, we don't have security cameras in the chapel. And if you're thinking the guy wasn't really dead, I'm not in a third world country. He was dead. He had been embalmed. You don't tend to survive an embalming. So yeah, it was a massive investigation and no one could explain how he ended up like that. It still gives me the creeps every time I go in there. A buddy picked me up to go to a couple bars, have a few drinks and whatnot. Everything was fine. I had a nice little drunk going on. Around 11 p.m. I went outside to smoke a stogie, then boom, I woke up at my house in my bed the following morning. I don't recall even leaving the bar, let alone how I returned home. I had multiple missed calls from my buddy, called him up to see what happened, and he said I just disappeared. The creepy part is, after I got off the phone with him, I went to the restroom to realize some way, somehow, during this time I went MIA, I had received a haircut and someone shaved my face. Weird. I do my business, only to realize my wiggly bits had been groomed as well, with expertise precision I must add, not a missed hair nick or cut. Still to this day, don't know what happened, but upon sharing the story with other friends, I was spotted at other bars throughout the night, pre-haircut and alone. When I was about 15, I was home alone in my house at night. It was just me and my 3 dogs. My dogs were normally very lazy at night. All they would do is lay in their dog beds, chilling out until bedtime. But for some reason on this night, they all became very agitated at the same time. They all kept running into different rooms in my house and growled and barked at empty corners, something that they had never done before or since. I checked the whole house and never found anything. I don't believe in anything supernatural, but that night I slept in my parents' bedroom with the door locked, a gun next to me, and all 3 dogs on the bed with me. When I was 13, I had a weird flash of a nightmare while asleep. All I remembered was kneeling on asphalt and holding my hand to my mouth in the worst pain of my life. I told my mom about the dream because it scared me so much. 2 years later, I was hit by a car while crossing the street and ended up in that exact position, kneeling on asphalt, holding my mouth while blood poured out. My head had apparently bounced off the rearview mirror, and that had knocked my 2 front teeth back into my soft palate. I didn't remember the dream, but my mom did, and it really fucked with her. I don't believe in premonitions, but I often wonder if maybe traumatic events can echo somehow through time. My mother died of cancer when I was a little over 30. She got a stroke on a day I was very busy at school, so my last words to her that she could understand were, "Mom, not now, I'll call you later." 2 hours later, she was admitted to a hospital and never woke up again. Half a year later, I had minor surgery, but because of the pain, I was given morphine. I was in the hospital bed when my mom came in, took a seat next to my bed, and we talked for an hour. It was so extremely real. I felt her touch on my hand, and we had a very good conversation. I got to know about morphine only a month later when I received the bill. Till then, I was sure it wasn't a hallucination, and I started rethinking my opinion about the possibility of an afterlife. I miss her so fucking much. I'd take a shot when I know she'd come to visit me again. About 10 years ago, I was sitting in my room and I heard my doorknob slowly turning. I thought it was my dad seeing if I was napping and trying to be quiet. I watched the knob turn and heard the springs in the mechanism squeaking, and then the sound of the latch slide off the metal plate as it was pushed open a bit, and I sat up to greet my dad and asked what he needed. I didn't see anyone, and then the door moved like it was pushed again, and it opened more, only for me to clearly see my dad in the living room sitting on the couch. This was so significant to me that I wrote down the time and exactly what happened. I didn't keep a diary or anything like that. I just couldn't explain it. The door was shut all the way and latched properly, and the air kicking on or another door opening would have sucked the door shut, as it had many times before. At the time, I was also seeing a shadow figure peer around my doorframe, about 6 feet tall, solid black. All of my family is like 5'7" or under and very white. And the side it peeked from was about 3 inches from the doorframe to the wall. No one could fit there, and it would just stare at me in my bed, leaning in and out of view. Don't remember if I had posted this before, but it was when my hubby was sick and I had to travel to another city to take care of him. He traveled to another city for work, which wasn't that far from where we lived, and he was staying at his uncle's condo. My hubby is one who tries to power through everything, so when he called me and said he needed me, I went. I arrived at the condo and found him in the living room, asleep. So I go to gently wake him up and let him know I arrived. He gets up rather quickly, and with his eyes closed, he begins to talk. He says they don't like him, and they've been hurting him. I asked him who is they, and he said the ones that stay there. I don't know why or how he's talking to me because he's not awake, and it's starting to freak me out. So I ask who is they, and he said the ghosts. I said there's no such thing as ghosts, but then he gets excited and says they are here. Before I can ask another question, he says the lights will go off, letting us know they aren't happy with me there. Sure enough, the lights in the living room turned off and everywhere downstairs. I'm thinking, WTF is going on? My hubby then goes back down and starts sleeping. I stayed the night with him, and he talked on and off again without opening his eyes, saying they pushed him down the stairs and made his clothes fly out of the closet. I tried to sleep but kept having weird dreams of an Asian family looking at me from the stairs. Finally, morning comes, my hubby wakes up and asks, what am I doing there? I said, you called me and asked me to come here because you didn't feel good. He said he didn't remember calling me or the conversation he was having. A weird fucking night. I asked that he not stay there anymore, and he didn't.
Was there a moment wherein you thought it was a glitch in the Matrix? What are your stories? I have a very visually distinctive necklace. Well, one day after I took it off, it just disappeared. I looked and looked for it, finally giving up, and wrote my necklace off as lost forever. A few weeks later, I was dusting the ceiling fan when I noticed a shadow in the light globe, so I undid the globe from the fan, thinking the shadow was maybe a bug. No bug, the shadow was my necklace. I woke up in the morning and saw a trailer for the movie Hannah. I was then scrolling through my Google Calendar and saw it was my friend Hannah's birthday. Later on in the night, I had some friends come over and we were about to go to a bar. I ordered DoorDash and the delivery girl's name was Hannah. I went out that night and got a girl named Hannah's number who I dated for about 6 months. Nothing else came up of the relationship, but that was an extremely bizarre coincidence and follow-up circumstance. It made me really consider the Matrix theory. We visited the Space Flight Center in Huntsville a few years ago and I got an A12, looks like the SR-71 coffee cup. I started drinking coffee in it every day and for more than a year everything was normal. I wake up, go pour coffee, drink it downstairs, wash it, then go back in my office upstairs. Sometimes I get a second cup of coffee and bring it up to my office and then bring it down when I'm done to wash and reset for the day. On May 1st of last year, I forgot to bring it back downstairs from my office. Next morning, I wake up and go downstairs to have a cup of coffee, like usual, in my A12 cup I got from the Space and Rocketry Center in Huntsville, Alabama. When I'm done, I wash it and put it away and go upstairs to start work. And there's the cup from the day before with an inch of cold coffee in it. I bring it downstairs, trying to figure out what's going on, and the one I just used is still sitting in the drying rack. I now have 2 A12 coffee cups in the month since. They've both picked up a little bit of their own character, but at the time I bought the original and its doppelkupper together. They had the same scuff marks and were in every way I could tell identical. I don't have an explanation for how this happened. I don't know how this cup somehow duplicated or why or how to do it again, but what I do have is 2 A12 cups, even though I only bought one. There was a girl at a place I worked that I flirted with for a couple of months. It was weird because she sometimes seemed a lot more interested than others, like aggressively. One day I finally got the nerve up to ask her out and she said yes. So that weekend I show up at her house to pick her up, and when the door opens, there are 2 of them, twins. Turns out they took turns working the job, and the one I asked out, not aggressive, was just as nervous as I was, so her sister was acting like a wing girl to encourage things to happen. We all got a good laugh out of it, and I dated her for about a year. At work, it was always funny to try and figure out who was actually working after that, although I did get better after we'd been dating for a bit. Years ago, I lost a can of tuna. I took it out of the pantry to make a sandwich, but then decided to just have cereal and put it back. Before I got the cereal, I changed my mind again and took the can back out of the pantry and set it down. I had been craving tuna on toast with extra tomato and had bought it the evening before, specifically to make that. I get the can opener, and the can was gone. I looked all over the kitchen and never found it. I even checked the pantry, and sure enough, I was missing a can. I had bought a certain number, like 4 for $1 or something. This was in the 90s. I walked by my colleague who was having a conversation. The convo definitely continued after I passed. I walked another 150 meters, went up a staircase, and walked by a room. My colleague was in that room talking to another person. I was shook. Later in the day, I verified that I had indeed passed her. I asked how she could have gotten past me, and she just said, "I'm a fast walker." "You ain't that fast." She would have had to run up a different staircase, outpace me in the same hall but 1 floor above. I just didn't see how it happened. A coworker was suddenly married with kids. I had been at my job since September of last year. I work in a female-dominated field, and there's only one male that I interact with any regularity. When I first started working with my new coworkers, gave me the lowdown on everyone we worked with, including this guy. They tell me this guy's in his 40s, he's single, and has never been married. I pay special attention to that information because I think he's cute. I even look him up on Facebook, and yep, he's a bachelor. Without giving too much detail, this guy emails me about an issue a month ago. His wife, who apparently exists and works for our company, then also emails me. I'm flabbergasted. The wife mentions their 2 teenage daughters. I'm further flabbergasted. I grill my coworker about all this, and they're confused. This guy has been married for 15 years, and they definitely never told me he was single. I look for his Facebook again, and he doesn't have one. There's no possible way I could have gotten him mixed up with anyone else either. He has a distinctive name, and like I said, he's the only man I work with. Also, any single person knows damn well they commit to memory the relationship status of someone they find attractive. Still don't know what to make of it. It was like the wife didn't exist until she was relevant to the plot. As a kid, 7, I had a Nintendo 64 and I owned one copy of Mario Kart. Years later, 12, while in my kitchen, I see something under the fridge, another copy of Mario Kart. Now there were 2. I kept them both in a drawer. Then like 2 to 3 months ago, 16, I was looking for both copies, only one. The one I found under the fridge was gone. I knew which was which because I labeled them fridge and original, since the fridge one didn't work. It was so strange because I remember finding the fridge one in the first time and being weirded out because the family had never bought a new one, and we were the first people to own the house, so no one could have left it there. This happened about 2 months ago. I went to visit my friend at her new apartment. I had never been there before. I Google mapped it and my other friend drove me. We parked and walked up to apartment B. At the bottom of the stairs was this weird guy who immediately started to try to talk to us and ask us questions and proceeded to follow us up the stairs. Mind you, this is not a great part of town. I knock on the door, and as soon as the door cracked open, before looking, I started pushing my way inside to get away from this creep. The girl who answered is not my friend, and obviously stops me from entering. I say, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." And we took off while she yelled at the man whom she apparently knew, saying, "Are you bothering these people?" etc. So, my friend and I ran back to her car, where I called my friend and told her what happened. She said she lives in the next block of buildings over. Apparently, they are the same apartment complex and have the same numbers. I'm not sure how that's supposed to not be greatly confusing. We park a little further down the road and walk up to the complex, and the same creep is sitting at the bottom of these stairs, doing exactly the same thing. Says the same thing to us again, IDK. It was weird. Why is this apartment the same? Looks the same numbers, same creep at the bottom of the stairs, just no. I was maybe around 5 years old, pretending to be a magician. I put a pen in this big activity book and waved my hands over it and said abracadabra to make the pen disappear. The pen literally disappeared. The bulge you would see of a pen being in a book was gone. Looked through the entire book, looked around the floor, couldn't find it, never found it. We moved out of that house when I was 11 and never found the pen. My bedroom at the time led into the living room that you could see into the kitchen. We also had a bathroom that was directly off of our room in the corner. You couldn't get to it unless you were in our room. I woke up one afternoon. I remember sitting up, checking my phone and lighting a cigarette. I got out of bed, opened the bedroom door, walked into the living room to turn the thermostat up. I saw my ex in the kitchen fiddling around with the coffee pot. Then he started walking toward the back of the house into the other bedroom. I said, "Hey, you're up early." He looked at me and kept on walking. I went back into our room and sat on the bed. After a few minutes, I called his name, and he opened the bathroom door and said, "Yeah?" Apparently, he was in the bathroom the whole time. I was very confused and super freaked out because I could have sworn I saw him in the kitchen. There's no way it was him if he was in the bathroom. It shook me up pretty bad. My first job after college. One night I was working a bit late and ended up leaving the office at roughly 6:30. I was living with my parents at the time, who were a 17-minute drive from my office. There was rarely any traffic on my drive home, so this was usually pretty consistent. I got in the car and drove straight home. I arrived back home at my parents' house around 8:15. I still have no idea where the extra 88 minutes went. The only rational explanation I could come up with was that I somehow worked an extra hour without noticing it. However, this would have required me to misread both the clocks in my workplace as well as the one in my car, which I recalled looking at before pulling out of the parking lot. I checked all of my clocks the next day, and none of them were wrong. It's been several years now, so my brain is more inclined to believe that I somehow made a mistake. But at the time, I remember methodically going through all the possibilities and disproving them one by one. I was leaving work one night with a coworker. We worked on the 4th floor of this building and take the stairs down to the parking garage. He's about half a flight of stairs behind me, and at a certain point, I have a thought that we have just walked down way too many stairs. It's like 8 half flights of stairs, and we definitely were going too long, maybe an extra 4 or 6, I don't know. The second I have that thought, I see the door for the emergency exit, which is 1 flight up from where the door is for the parking garage. It was like instant. Had the thought and then saw the door. Then everything was back to normal. We weren't talking at all the whole time, and then my coworker was like, that took longer than normal. We weren't walking slow. I practically run down the stairs, but it was like we got stuck on a Stairmaster staircase or some shit for a minute, and he knew it too. When I was in school, grade 5 to 6, I went through a phase of having very, very strong deja vu. And during the same time frame at school, there was this one incident I will never ever forget as long as I live. During lunch break, I turned around and everything was pitch black, and the people and buildings closest to me were the first things to come into view again, as if my world was loading, you know? Behind the buildings was all still pitch black, and further away, the image of the world was loading like in a video game, like how the graphics aren't loading far off in the distance. It was exactly like that. It was a very momentary thing, and I remember asking my friends if they saw that. Not sure if this is related or not, but I was recently diagnosed with derealization disorder, which may or may not explain things, although I do believe back then was different from what I experience now. As a young kid, I was playing my He-Man action figures in my bedroom on a sunny afternoon. I remember getting a feeling of being watched in a loving manner by someone I sensed to be a male. I looked around, looked out of the window, and saw no one. I was kind of excited because I thought it was my father who had split from my other, and I haven't seen in person since, still haven't. As there were no one around, any family members in the house were in the kitchen, I resumed playing with toys. Almost 3 decades later, my mother had gotten deep into reincarnation beliefs. I don't believe in that because, frankly, the idea of being born again and living again and meeting the same people again in different bodies doesn't even begin to excite me as it excites her. Coming back again and again sounds like a cruel prison to me. Anyway, I read a book in which someone mentioned doing a past life hypnotic regression and decided to look for that too. If it was real, I should be able to experience it too. If it was bullshit, I would be able to tell. Found someone who could do it in my town, but didn't want to pay for a charlatan. Found a YouTube video of someone guiding a session like that. He didn't go straight into the past life, but asked you to go back to childhood, then the womb, then beyond that. When I guided myself back to past as a childhood, I found myself watching me playing with the He-Man action figures from the place where I, as a kid, felt the presence of an adult male watching me. I found myself full of compassion for that kid, for what was about to come about in his life, wanting to protect him and help him flourish, as a father would. A few years ago, I was crossing the street and this little old lady wearing a pink and blue jacket was joyously crossing in the opposite direction with a smile on her face. My view is temporarily blocked by a tall man between us. As the tall man walked past me, the lady is gone. I looked back 3 times in disbelief. She was gone. The street wasn't super busy or anything, just a few people walking, quite a lot of open spaces, so there was no place she could have hidden into. Why would she anyway? This was the first and last time I had such an experience. My husband and I decided to go to a local sub shop for lunch one day. Driving down a busy one-way street in an area with lots of office buildings, we saw a guy walking, presumably toward his own car for lunch, and I commented, "That guy must work someplace where you can wear a Batman t-shirt and Birkenstocks to work." Maybe not nice to talk about people, but hey, it's what we do. We get to the sub shop, having driven directly there, about 2 miles down the road, and that same guy is hanging out in the parking lot smoking a cigarette. Same Nike baseball cap, same red Batman t-shirt, same ripped jeans, same Birkenstocks, and my husband even said he recognized his face. There's no way this is a different guy. There are no faster routes, and there's absolutely no way he could have hopped in a car and beaten us there. We were both kind of freaked out. He sat a few tables away from us at lunch, and we almost asked him about it, but how do you start that conversation? I don't know if this is classified as a glitch in the Matrix, but it's more of a memory that my brain simply made up, I think. Sorry for the bad storytelling and grammar mistakes, I'm typing on my phone right now. When I was a kid, I used to get sick like every 2 or 3 months, bad immunity system, IG. One time, when I had a terrible cold, I was brought to the hospital. I was treated and I stayed overnight at the hospital for monitoring. I woke up in the middle of the night. I assume it was the middle of the night because, as I'm about to specify, the room was dark. I didn't even know the time. The hospital room I was in was dark. Seconds after I woke up, one of the nurses that set up my heart monitor and stuff walked into the room. I asked the nurse something along the lines of, "What's going on?" The nurse didn't reply. Keep in mind my parents are sleeping in the same room as me, in 2 separate beds that basically took up all the space in the hospital room itself. I fall asleep about 10 seconds later, and when I wake up, I ask my mom if she remembers the nurse coming into our room late at night and doing something. My mom was confused, seeing that she was awake the whole night. She only got about 1 hour's sleep, and that was from like 7 to 8 a.m. She told me no one came into the room, whether it was a nurse or my father coming back from the bathroom. Literally, no one came into the room or exited it. Around 8, maybe 9 years ago, I live in East Grinstead, Sussex, UK. My wife, then girlfriend, and I were driving back home one day, and we drove past the entrance to Tully's farm. We then drove about 30 seconds up the road and a couple of bends on and ended up driving past the entrance to Tully's farm again, on the same side of the road. I slowed the car, and before I could say anything, my wife said, "Didn't we just pass Tully Farm?" I agreed. We got home and checked Google Maps. Tully's Farm, one entrance on a straight road, with no way we could have doubled back round. We had simultaneous deja vu. TLDR. Had to empty out my apartment just before going on exchange to Australia, so sold some furniture I really loved. A full year later, precisely the same furniture shows up at my Australian place without notice. My first reaction was to assume I was being followed. Right. So I got offered a spot in an exchange program to Australia just before my final semester at uni late in 2019. I had moved to a different state for school and eventually rented a place when my sister did the same. That semester, though, she had quit college and moved back in with our parents. So when I got the offer, we decided to sell everything I had there so I wouldn't have to worry about storage or whatever. Two of the things I sold were a couple of black counter-height bar stools that I really liked because they worked perfectly in our studio apartment. Well, sold them, emptied out the apartment, bought the tickets, first time abroad, 30-plus hour trip, room rental, hunting in a new country, found a great couple to live with, got used to a new city, new uni, new place COVID hit, COVID under control, amazing road trip to Queensland with great friends, said goodbye to great friends, decided to stay and see if things would get better back home. Second semester at new uni, assignments piled up, deadlines approaching, couple of all-nighters, and then bam. One morning, I come downstairs all drowsy and struggling to submit a challenging essay, and just at the bottom of the staircase are exactly the two black counter-height bar stools. Precisely two. Same color, same model. Both standing randomly in the middle of the hallway, turned towards me. I just couldn't rationalize what was happening for a second, and my first reaction was to assume they'd been following me. Truly, it's just a story about globalized economy, but for some solid 20 seconds, I was mind blown. Turns out, one of our neighbors left them on the curb and my housemates picked them up and brought them home, but hadn't figured out where to put them just yet. Pretty normal stuff. Also, pretty sure they questioned my sanity for a moment there. I just couldn't quite explain why I was so shaken. My whole life is like a badly written movie. My mom and dad were both cartoon-like characters. I got stuff like a super prestigious scholarship not by hard work, but by being at the right place at the right time. I accidentally ended up in places like Vietnam or Los Angeles. Who the fuck does that happen to? I encountered so many people that come right out of a movie, like a millionaire criminal, got in badly abusive situation with my ex who tortured animals, got deus ex machina type help from near strangers. I was once cycling at night in the woods, no moon so pitch black, and came across someone lost in the woods. I've been an invisible homeless, and I've earned $65 an hour. I firsthand got involved in police and government corruption in the USA again by complete happenstance. I've had more to move 2,000 miles on 1 week notice just again. The people I come across in my life are so absurd, it's hard to believe they're real, and so many of them. I'm also this cool neuroatypical who is apparently witty and funny in real life just by being clueless, you know? Like a badly written character with weird quirks, like inability to feel angry, which turns out to be an asset. And I get crazy bad luck, like medical malpractice, but also weird good luck. Like my landlord rented to me on the spot without checking my employment or credit. I don't qualify at all, and way underpricing his unit because he got good vibes from me. I'm not happy. I'm really, really tired. I've never pursued any of this. I've been exhausted since I was a toddler. My life goal was to literally live in a single bedroom and work as a cleaning lady or waitress, and instead all this shit happened somehow. I'm literally a polyglot and fetish prostitute now in a country and continent that I never planned to step foot in. I want this to be my final destination, but because of my life experience, I don't know how to feel home somewhere. I don't trust anything to remain, like I have trouble even buying a closet because my experience is always having to leave behind to lose. It feels like I'm the test character in the Matrix, experimenting with storylines on me before implementing them elsewhere. So many times, I felt like I've fallen through my bed. I was fully awake, then actually scrambled to grab the sides or something because it was so sudden. Then all of a sudden I was fine. I've lost so many things in one certain spot of my house that I'll no longer sit things there because they disappear. For some reason, I'll lose every single hairbrush I have. I have no idea where they are because a hairbrush isn't really something I carry around my house, but yet I have to get a new one every couple months. I felt like I've relived days of my life where I'm doing the exact same thing, having the exact same conversations. I've even told my husband, sometime in the next month or two, this is what's going to happen. This is the conversation we'll have, etc. And when it happens, I ask him if he remembers me telling him, and it freaks him out. I'll do one specific thing like put a random tack in the wall somewhere for no reason, just so when it happens and I do it again, I can make sure it's real and actually happening and that I'm not crazy. It's the worst when I'm driving because 1 second I'll be on the road heading home, I know I zone out, but I'm not sure how badly, and then in the next couple of seconds, I'm pulling in.
What thing you accidentally saw in your childhood that still haunts you to this day? Parents are cops. When I was a kid, I accidentally mistook my father's USB stick for mine.
I was prepping to get a school project done and found images of a crime scene instead. Very graphic picture of a guy with half his head missing. Looked like it was blown off. I immediately shut off my PC and returned it. Even though it was only for a split second, I still remember the images. Another time when I was 8 years old, the apartment I was living in was set on fire in the middle of the night. Apparently, some boys decided arson was funny. Anyway, my family ran out and I catch a glimpse of one of the residents being pulled out of the fire, completely torched from head to toe, still alive and looked like he was in extreme agony. That shook me to my core. I still think about that. I was maybe 6 or 7. On my way down to New York City, we drove by a bad car accident where a woman was laying on the ground next to a smoking, smashed-up car, convulsing, likely seizures. There were some citizens helping her, but seeing that was my first real exposure to something real like that. I was 9 years old when me and my friends went to buy ice cream from a nearby shop. There is this big street with a lot of traffic on it. We went on a race of who will get there faster, and then my friend went to the middle of the street running without looking for oncoming cars and got hit with pretty high speed. Man, it was messy. His head hit the ground and there was blood and brain splashed everywhere. But what hit me the hardest were the screams from his mother when she saw it happen. Man, I don't wish this to anyone. When I was 10 years old, I was flashed by, I'm guessing, a 30-year-old man in my front yard. He was wearing a green trench coat, and when I was walking up to my side door of the house, he was standing by the tree in the front yard. He saw me as soon as I looked at him. He opened the coat, and he was wearing a pair of women's pantyhose and nothing else. I honestly didn't really know what I was looking at, but he scared me, so I ran into the house and told my mom. He was gone by the time she went outside. Not so much haunted, but still don't know what his intention was, and that bugs me. When I was about 8, I went to a small private school that had a nice playground behind it. Some trees had been cut down to make room for play equipment, and some of the stumps were left behind. One day, this younger kid, maybe 6 or so, was running like crazy through the playground and tripped and landed face first on top of one of the stumps. He got up and started screaming. Turned, and I saw there was blood pouring from the bottom of both his eyes. He ended up being fine, no lasting damage, but the mental image I have of him staggering across the playground, mouth open, screaming, and blood pouring from his eyes still haunts me. I was around 8 or 9 years old, and I saw Tarzan stabbing Jane with his, sword. It was during a family reunion, and kids being kids were fooling around and got bored. One of my cousins suggested we watch a movie, and casually took one of our aunt's phones without her knowing. Didn't really know how he got her password, but he manages to open it and found a video file. He pressed play and voila, here comes Tarzan. Came to realize years later, it was a porn parody. No one ever talked about it afterwards. I don't really know why that memory stuck to me. When I was 5, my family went on a trip to the Boundary Waters. We were staying there for a couple of days. We would go canoeing for most of the day. I remember one day, my brother, who is 12 years older than me, went canoeing without me. It was a Saturday afternoon and it was sunny. He told me about this little island by the shore where he would sometimes hang out. Excited, I agreed to go with him. When we got there, we immediately got hit with an awful stench. We searched around and we stumbled across 2 large black garbage bags. With the smell, we already knew what was in there. Definitely not garbage. We canoed as fast as we could back to our site. We called the authorities and we found out that they were in fact 2 dead bodies. Haunts me to this day when I realized that my family could have been among a serial killer for our entire trip. One fall night, on the local news I saw a report about the police finding the body of a local man who went missing in the spring. He had hung himself in the woods behind my house. All of us local kids had been playing in those woods all summer long with a dead body hidden up one of those trees by the leaves. He was only found because the leaves had fallen off and exposed his body. I still get shivers thinking about it. When I was 12 or so, I tried to hold the door for a mother and her daughter while I was on my way into a Borders, the bookstore. When they got through the first set of doors, I was holding the second door open with my foot while facing them and smiling politely. When they gave me a really weird look, I turned around to see that the door had fallen shut. I had just been standing there smiling at them like a moron. I still think about it on a weekly basis, and I'm 31. I know it's not unusual, but when I was maybe 12, our first cat got hit by a car and we found him on the road where he'd been hit by a snowplow. I helped pick him up to be buried and he was so stiff with a little blood trickling out of his mouth, and I realized how different something was when the life had left it.
I cried for a long time and dwelt on it for longer. I used to have a recurring daydream where I'd go outside and the cat would show up and we realized it had somehow been a mistake. I've been sad a lot of times since, but that one was heartbreaking in the manner of a first loss, and it's still hard to think about. As a second grade girl on the school bus in Miami, I was sitting in bumper-to-bumper traffic coming home from school. I was kind of in my own little world, looking out the window down into the cars below, and I saw this guy wiggling something dark and floppy around in his lap. I was just old enough to know that this guy had different stuff down there than girls, but not old enough to have a clear concept of what that really meant. He looked up and saw me and grinned. In the shadowed interior of the car, where the visor blocked the light from his upper body, I just saw a Cheshire cat-style toothy smile floating above, where the sunlight from the window fully illuminated his lap. I froze and didn't say anything to anyone, and he kept up with the bus for several more blocks, stopping and staying next to us for as long as he could. I never said anything to anyone at the time, because that would be the point. To this day, I'm glad that I didn't, because it just would have upset my parents, and they would have felt helpless to do anything to fix it. I don't think I am deeply traumatized or anything, but the visual is still perfectly stamped in my mind down to every fine detail. My baby brother's dead body. He died of SIDS while we were at the babysitter's house. She sent me to the spare room when she realized he was gone. I spied out and watched the EMTs scoop him up and put him on a tiny stretcher and take him away. I think the most vivid part was watching out of the window while they were loading him into the truck and noticing he was missing a sock. I didn't understand death at the time, and I was worried about his foot getting cold. It's probably my depression's favorite intrusive thought. I have a strangely specific memory of a dream I had as a small child. It was about Inspector Gadget. The dream was from the perspective of some female villain who, looking at a screen on which she spied on Gadget and had a panel with various body parts. She had the ability to kill a body part by pressing a button. She said things like, "Who will know what happened to his knee?" and then pressed the knee. Gadget's knee died, but he was fine. She did this with a few body parts before saying, "Well, who will know what happened to his heart?" She then pressed the heart button. The dream ended with Inspector Gadget clutching his chest and crying in anguish, "How will I live without my heart?" What was the question? Ended up riding an elevator with a dead man inside, beaten to death by another neighbor. Russia. Though I guess somebody more haunting was the funny guy that came to my kindergarten fence every recess and peed. Every day, same place, same time, while looking at my friend and me. We were 3 and thought it was funny that he was so exact about his peeing habits. My grandma's backyard backed up to a paved walking trail with woods beyond it. We used to take walks back in the woods with my mom when we were kids. One day when I was like 10ish, late 90s, we were visiting and deciding to take a walk into the woods. A few hundred feet in, we came across a tree with notes pinned to it, with candles and teddy bears strewn around the base of the trunk. It was obviously a memorial. From what we gathered from the notes, we of course didn't touch anything, but some were nailed full sheet to the tree. A young man had hanged himself from the tree maybe 2 days before. It was the night of his high school graduation after the ceremony. He had a lot of friends who loved and missed him a ton. I remember being able to feel the sadness coming from the language in the notes. We stayed quiet a long time before my mom told us to bless ourselves, and we all walked away quietly back to my grandma's and didn't go for any more walks in the woods. I don't know what he looked like, but his name was Brian, and I've never forgotten about him. Blood group tattoo on the arm of an elderly German hog farmer. He was in his 60s or 70s. This was 1987, 88. I was old enough to be curious as to what it was, but not old enough to know not to ask. He walked away. His wife told us it was a mistake he made when he was young, and he regrets it every day. Later, he told me in broken English, "Bad people do bad things. Sometimes they make others do them too." My dad and I watched a girl get choked at a gas station. Because of the look on her face, she looked like she was laughing. We both thought they were goofing off. Turns out she was grimacing because he was choking her before taking her credit card. I sat in the car blissfully unaware, and my dad came out and told me she came in behind him and told the store employees what happened. I saw the graphic aftermath of a snake that had been run over when I was around 8 or 9. Then, when I was in 5th grade, my buddy got pregnant and had a prolapse when she delivered the egg. I didn't know what birthing was like, so I thought it was normal, but then she died from blood loss.
The first time I saw something die was when my guinea pig died when I was 7, and that was somewhat worse even though it wasn't graphic. He was choking and I didn't know what to do. I just watched helplessly, and then he suddenly became still and his eyes were open and glazed over when it happened. It was summertime, and I, 10 years old at the time, was in my room, home alone. My parents were out getting a new car, but I'd gotten sick, so I decided to stay home and wait for my brother to get back, when I heard some kind of loud noise and yelling coming from the driveway. My room was at the front of the house. My brother, 17, had gone out with his friends earlier, as he and most people his age usually did during summer, so me, thinking it was them, went over and opened the front door, and I saw my brother and his friends on the driveway standing near the body of this kid who I knew from school. She was covered in blood and her left arm and leg looked all twisted, and there was a part of her head missing and lots more stuff that I don't really want to describe, but all in all, it was absolutely horrifying. I promptly closed the door behind myself. Apparently, my brother and his friends had been messing around too much with each other and had thought it would be funny to swerve into our driveway like in an action movie, but they didn't notice this girl walking to the park who was in their way. Stepsister almost drowned. We were at a lake and playing in the water. We knew she couldn't swim, so we stayed close to the shore, like real close, about 5 or 6 feet out. It was maybe waist height for me and chest height for her. Well, I had gotten out of the lake and was talking to my dad on the docks when she started flailing around and having trouble keeping her head above the water. I don't know why, but I froze up. I could see her. I could see she was drowning, but I just stood there. Luckily, my dad was more responsive. He rushed into the water and pulled her out, I guess. She was above some slippery rocks and lost her footing and was having trouble getting it back and panicked. When I was a child, I was at the home of family friends playing with their children while my parents and their friends were watching a horror movie. I don't remember much of the movie's name, but it had something to do with the woman in black. And from time to time, me and the other kids would go check out a little bit of the movie before playing again. Among those little glances in the film, there were many scenes that terrified me. I couldn't sleep that night, and I remember very well seeing the woman in black at the entrance to my door looking at me. This caused me a lot of trouble sleeping and fear of the dark. Until today, I have an irrational fear of the dark. I had some problems with paranoia that included feeling things, hearing voices, and having some false memories. I can't understand how a movie caused all of this. Nowadays, I love horror movies, especially the slashers, but this one of the woman is one that I don't dare to see again. When I was a kid, I was always feeding stray cats. There was this one that had become very tame and was special to me. I was starting to think about asking my parents if we could adopt it. One day I was sick, so I stayed home from school. The cat didn't show up for her morning feeding, and as the day went on, I started to get worried. I searched outside, still in my pajamas and barefoot, and found the cat's body along the side of our house. I was very distraught and also mystified about what could have happened. When my mom got home from work, she admitted that she had found the cat dead in the street. She knew I would go looking for it and didn't want me to find it that way. So she put it in a box along the side of the house. Underestimating my determination to find the cat when I went looking, she planned to tell me later that day. I wish she would have just taken the moment to tell me the truth before she left for work, so I wouldn't have had the shock of finding the poor kitty like I did, though I'm grateful she didn't leave it in the street. When I was 9, my mom got diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer. For 3 years, she was either in a hospital or a family friend's nursing home. During those 3 years, I saw her no more than 7 or 8 times for 20 minutes each time. On my 12th birthday, my dad brought me to see her at a nursing home. My mom, the woman I remembered as young, active, always laughing, was unrecognizable. She had pale, dry skin. She was alive with her eyes open, but couldn't speak, move, eat, or do much of anything. Any normal person would say she looked like she was 80 years old. I told her, "It's me, your son," but she didn't respond. So I grabbed her hand to hold it. Just as I moved it, blood started covering the bed, floor, and me. You see, because her cancer, her large intestines were removed, so she had a colostomy bag instead. As she got sicker, her colostomy bag filled up with blood, just like a red water balloon because of internal bleeding. It was completely full and only supported by her hand next to it. When I moved her hand, the bag moved too and leaked blood everywhere. All this happened as my dad was talking to a nurse down the hall, completely oblivious. I stood there in shock and watched as my mom, who I hadn't seen in close to a year, bleed to death. A little while later, a nurse and my dad came in and freaked out They called an ambulance, but she was already gone. TL, DR, 12-year-old me watched my mom bleed to death. I was obsessed with 9/11 as a kid and would watch videos of what happened day in and day out. I came across a video that showed some of the people who were jumping out of the buildings and hitting the ground. Seeing that at 9 or 10 years old really traumatized me. Just thinking about it now still freaks me out sometimes. NSFW. What's the most fucked up thing you've witnessed? I did hazmat cleanup as a part-time gig one summer. Had to clean up a murder-suicide. A guy strangled his wife because he thought she was going to leave him, then put the business end of a 12 gauge in his mouth and pulled the trigger. Needless to say, it was a mess. The worst part was that they had a 6-year-old son who wasn't there to see his parents die, or so they thought. Apparently, he was supposed to be with his grandmother. Well, his mom decided to pick him up early that day. He ran and hid in the closet when the fighting started, and that's where we found him. Unfortunately, his dad found him there too and broke his neck. The police didn't search his room and never bothered to verify that his grandmother had him. This was 3 days after the incident. He'd been in there the whole time and nobody knew it. I'm the lucky one who found him. I will never forget it. Saddest fucking thing that I've ever experienced. He was innocent in every way and was murdered by his own father because he was mad at his mother. There's a special place in hell for people that bring harm to children, and an even better place for a father that kills his own flesh and blood. I hope he's getting what he deserves. In a restaurant called Joe's Diner on Main Street in Santa Monica in 1991, I was there by myself one night and some kind of bizarre ruckus went on outside involving a high-speed car chase, all skidding and crashing right outside the restaurant. The El Camino being chased crashed and set fire to 2 other cars. Cops were all over the place and my car was outside but on this side of the street. The cars on fire were on the other side. Now my car was trapped there for hours because the police had to tape the whole scene down since the dude in the bed at the El Camino had been cut in half on impact. My God, there was blood and body bits everywhere. Don't need to see that again. Ended up being a 4-hour restaurant visit. I was playing GTA San Andreas in one of those cyber cafes we have here in Mexico, and some dude just came in and tried to molest a kid. I was like 14 years old, so I just turned to see the business owner, who happened to be my friend, and was a tall, bulky man, to see if he was going to do anything about it, and he just moved his head in a way to tell me don't say or do anything, and later, when the fucked up guy walked away, my friend told me that the guy was on drugs, and was the son of a narco who lived just in front, so it's better to not say anything. Never went back there. I was in a subway station, getting ready to go to a museum with my dad. I was on summer break. There was a guy with his daughter who was no more than 7 years old. The father looked like your typical alcoholic dad, gross beard, tank top with holes in it, and a constant angry look on his face. It seemed that he was drunk, as he could hardly stand up straight. His daughter said something to him. I was too far away to hear what she said, and the father starts to kick and beat her. It took 7 guys to get him off. When they had him on the ground, the girl was on the floor unconscious with blood all over her face. I'm not sure what happened to the girl, but I assume that the dad went to prison. Training as an EMT. Get a call about a guy, forgot the complaint, but when we arrive, the door is locked and the police have to open it. Inside is a guy with a noose around his neck who immediately starts screaming, "Save me!" Promptly jumps off the chair, probably expecting to be hurt but okay. Instead, we hear a sickening snap. Broke his neck and died almost immediately. In my teens, I worked in a movie theater. One night I was asked by the manager to stay late and catch a private party with a very small group of other employees, basically to sell concessions and run a projector. Multiple all-black Mercedes G-Series vehicles pull into the back of the building, entered through the emergency exits carrying briefcases, and proceeded directly into the theater for the film they were there to watch. They sent out a couple guys to get the snacks and drinks. As soon as I got the projector running, we were told to leave and the manager would handle closing alone after they left. Of course, we all hung around the parking lot to watch these guys leave, witnessed some exchanges of said briefcases, and the guys left. All in the suburb of New Orleans. Aside, same weird manager also admitted to doing lots of coke, hit on teenage girls, and claimed one of his children was conceived on the couch in the break room. I grew up on a pig farm, so no surprise that's where I saw the most fucked up thing in my life. Typically, out of a batch of 100 or so hogs, a handful die before making it to the market. You usually have a pile near the edge of the property for these unfortunate pigs. One day my dad told me there was a dead hog he'd dragged out of the pen but not all the way to the pile a couple of days ago, and I was supposed to get the skid steer, basically a farm forklift, if you've never heard of it, and move that pig corpse. Well, it had been about 85 degrees for the 3 days or so it was dead, and it was all bloated and disgusting. The real bad part was through that, I am by no means an expert skid steer driver, and as I pulled up to it, I jabbed the forks into it and popped it. A greenish soup of decayed guts poured out, and the smell hit me so hard I had to drive backwards away for a minute to keep from throwing up. Eventually, I got it on the pile, but that was just fucking awful. Was visiting a bartender friend, and some random guy, a first-time customer, came into the bar. He ordered a beer, looked her up and down, and said without shame, "Hey baby, I'm gonna need to rape that ass later. Give me your numbers." Needless to say, not only was she flat out disgusted and insulted, but the patrons of the bar all assisted in helping him find the door. Seriously, who in their right mind would think that was an appropriate pickup line to use, especially nowadays? Was sitting at a red light on my way to see a movie. I saw someone flash in the rearview mirror, and a car on the left slammed into the car 2 lanes over, waiting on the same light. The car that got hit started on fire. We tried to get the person out of the car, but they were unconscious and the doors were completely jammed and mangled. They burned alive in front of us. The smell I will never forget. The driver that hit the car was drunk and of course was just fine. In my son's preschool class, another kid stabbed someone with scissors because the kid was breathing too loudly. I think he was sick. Very mild injury in the end and not a deep stab, but still horrific. Frightened to see what happens with that kid, but luckily he got kicked out. I saw a drunk man get his hand and leg mangled by an 18-wheeler in Mexico when I was 13 years old. My family was on vacation, mom, dad, little brother, grandma, uncle, aunt, and 2 cousins, and I was following my dad to this street full of vendor stalls. My dad walks really quickly, and I was the only one out of the group behind him. Everyone else was walking slow with grandma. The drunk man was crossing the side street with a Bacardi bottle, a big one in his hand, and wobbled too far to the left as an 18-wheeler was making a turn onto the main road. His hand and leg got run over as he fell. My dad and I stopped to look as people waved down the driver, and the guy's hand and leg were pinned under one of the wheels. He never dropped his bottle. He just laid there very calmly. I could see his bones in his hand and leg poking out. He was bleeding so much. My dad grabbed my hand and told me to keep walking. By the time the rest of my family caught up with us, the ambulance was trying to get through the side street and the scene was blocked off. Only me and my dad saw it. Not the most fucked up thing, but pretty fucked, was patrolling in Iraq a long time ago, and to get to one of the FOBs, you have to drive through this giant flat dump area. There were several families living there in an actual garbage dump, in houses made of coffee cans, tarps, and whatever else they could find. Their kids were often naked and malnourished. We gave them MREs and water when we could fill, but fuck, I'll never, ever forget those poor people. My memory is kinda shot, but those images are still crystal clear in my head. I've seen a couple of videos of people dying in gruesome ways, but watching those out of morbid curiosity just feels surreal, like it's hard to process that you've just seen someone die. However, I once saw a video of a guy who ate maggots. He stuck his hand inside a rotting deer carcass, grabbed a huge handful of maggots, and shoved them into his mouth. He chewed once and instantly started projectile vomiting. I like to think I've got a strong stomach, but that made me gag. That's got to be the most fucked up thing I've seen, because the guy did that to himself. All the other videos were accidents, but this guy willingly chose to do that to himself for the sake of a video. It's just so messed up. And before anyone asks me for the link, find it yourself. I'm never going to look for that shit again. My neighbors in the apartment I used to live when I was a kid were the most fucked up family ever. My bedroom and their living room were adjacent, so each night I used to fall asleep to the screams and cries of their kids as their alcoholic mom would beat them. The father was a cop, so nothing was ever done, but the mom screams still haunt me to this day. About 3 years ago, I witnessed in a mall parking lot some older guy yelling at his adult son, telling him that he's a worthless piece of shit and he wished his son was never born, and that every time he looks at him, he remembers how much of a fuck up his life was and how he wished that his son's recent suicide attempt was successful. Son was in tears and the father was all up in his face, just yelling and insulting him. He had eventually stormed off, got in his truck, and left the son there. Me and a group of people that also witnessed want to come for the son and figure out what happened. Apparently he came out to his dad. I witnessed and helped prevent a 13-year-old girl from being sexually assaulted by a creep. Many years ago, I was at a very adult-themed camping trip where alcohol and drugs were, well, everywhere. Some brilliant set of parents decided to bring their 13-year-old, very mature-looking daughter along. While her parents were checked out on ecstasy and God knows what else, she wandered into a large group tent that many of us were hanging out under. This dude, well in his late 40s, grimy as fuck, and obviously well-versed in his craft, started working on breaking down the defenses of this girl. Lucky, we were there to stop him and physically remove him when he started to get handsy with her. After we escorted the creep off the property, we gave her parents an earful and told them they would no longer be welcome in our circle of friends. I remember back in college, ISIS was on the rampage in Iraq, capturing contractors, journalists, any Westerner they could get their hands on. I was working in the university library media center, checking out books to patrons for classes and fun. It was a good gig, but it was quiet on some nights. My friend at the time and I were just talking about current events, and she mentioned the new ISIS video was out and making the rounds on the news cycle. I thought, why not check this out? I've never seen a snuff film or anything like this. I loaded up the video and hit play. It was the Nick Berg video, and I will never forget his screams as they sawed his head off with a knife. I can still hear the inflections in his voice as they sawed through his voice box and throat. Scariest thing I've ever seen that was real. It doesn't haunt me, but I can never not picture the moment and the sound. The remains of my best friend after he committed suicide. I was 16 and was with him the day before. We had stayed up all night playing Black Ops 2. His parents were out of town, so we had the house to ourselves. I went home around 7 a.m. I told him to come over my house, and he said he couldn't leave the house since he didn't have a key. I said okay, and that'll be over later. I go about my day as if nothing was out of the ordinary. I go to his house around 8 p.m. I go inside and set myself down on the couch and head to their kitchen to grab a yogurt. I head upstairs to his room and he's not there. I call for him and I go checking each room. I feel water on my feet and notice there's a whole bunch of water on the floor. Rushing to see what it was, I find the bathroom being flooded from an overflowed bathtub. The water was running red and my friend laid unresponsive in the tub. He had slashed his wrists. I'm 22 years old now and I still have nightmares about that day. No more than ever because his birthday is in a couple of days. I'm not the best at telling stories, so bear with me. So there was this car with no license plates that would stop in front of our house for like 5 minutes and just slowly drive away. And he would do it every night. So we tried to stay up and catch him. I don't know what we would have done. We didn't really have planned that out. And we would just watch outside our first floor window and sit. Around 4 a.m. rolls around and we see a car coming. So we close the blinds and watch. To our surprise, it's not him. But as the car drives past, an old lady in a nightgown appears right next to it, just out of thin air. And she's just sitting there with what looks like a box of papers for what seems like hours. She's just sitting there, not doing anything. At this point, we're all shitting ourselves. But then another car comes speeding down the street and drives past her, and the lady lets out the loudest, most blood-curdling scream and points at the car, and the car slams on its brakes and reverses next to the lady, and without any word said whatsoever, lets her in, and they drive off. Has someone you know ever tried to kill you, and why? When I was about 4 to 5 years old female, I had dreams about it growing up and then was told the whole story when I was older. My half-brother, who has empathy issues and poor choice skills, 16 at the time I believe, was playing a game where him and his friend were the bad guys, and me, my sister, and our cousin had to run from them. We were also playing in an abandoned shop our grandparents owned. Well, he ended up grabbing one of those sharp circle blades you cut wood with and threw it at me, slicing my head open. He then proceeded to scoop me up and climb onto the roof while I was bleeding in his arms. My grandpa had to climb onto the roof and take me from him so I could go with the ambulance. My ex-husband and I had been separated a few weeks. I arrived home late at night from work. My work shift ended at 11 p.m. I didn't notice his car in the parking lot as I walked toward my apartment until he gunned the engine and drove straight toward me. I ducked into the entrance alcove and his car struck a parking barricade and the curb and some landscaping before it stopped within 2 feet of me and the building. I ducked inside and called the police, not for the first time. Some asshole decided to string a thick line of wire across a dark, single lane of unlit country road in the middle of the night. Asshole's plan was to take out a vehicle in the hopes of killing the people inside. Well, the people inside were my mom and me, and the asshole, he was a good old dad. A true narcissistic psychopath who, despite his serial infidelity and his pathological lying, who decided he could not take the hit to his pride and ego of mom filing for divorce first. Her saying she was done before him was an unthinkable situation in his mind. He decided he would rather play the role of grieving widow than rejected husband, and as for me, he knew how he could use the death of his daughter to manipulate women into sleeping with him. This man my mom was with kidnapped me when I was 2 years old. I've always joked about it because the guy was just a loser alcoholic, and I assumed he did it just to upset my mother. When the cops found us, we were at his favorite bar. What kind of idiot kidnaps someone and then goes to a place where everyone knows that you go? That's why I never took it seriously. Well, 2 weeks ago, I'm texting with my older brother, and I made a joke about him kidnapping me. I said something like, what was he planning on doing? Raising me? Killing me? He was maybe 10 or 11 when this happened, so he remembers a lot of that day. He told me that I'm lucky to be alive. Apparently he planned on killing me. My mother had lied to him and told him that I was his kid. In a brief moment of clarity, he pieced together that the timing was off and I wasn't his. He went to the bar so he can get drunk enough to go through with it. I still can't really believe it. During my freshman year of college, I was having a conversation with a guy that lived in the same dorm that I did. In the middle of our conversation, I saw another guy I knew and waved. Apparently, the kid I was talking to got upset at this and started mumbling about how all girls are the same, and then started choking me. He actually lifted me by the neck and started pushing me back onto a bed. I just remembered the look in his eyes before I blacked out and seeing a couple of other dorm mates come to my rescue, as I had no time to even try to defend myself. I just remember I blacked out for I don't even know how long and woke up to the two guys, heroes, that forced him off of me, and they were just staring at me because they were so worried that they would have had to call the ambulance. A kid used to hang out with me in my neighborhood wanted to test my peanut allergy, so she deliberately ate a PB&J before seeing me and was very adamant on sharing a soda. Another kid was in on it, and when I drank from the soda after she did, they were both wide-eyed and asking me if I felt okay. Luckily, my allergy was not extremely sensitive, so I did not have a reaction and I was completely fine. The other kid told me about a year later, and that's the only reason I knew. I stopped talking to both of them. I was riding my motorcycle home from work when all of a sudden this van starts aggressively blocking me from passing him. No matter what I did, he would block me over and over. He was literally swerving from lane to lane to block me out. Finally, I passed him and then made a poor decision. I gave him the finger for blocking me. He immediately floored it and rammed me from behind, causing me to veer into another lane and slam into the side of a semi-truck. I managed to save it through sheer luck. I unfortunately never got his license plate, but it was the closest I've come to being murdered. My ex-husband was a controlling asshole who eventually cheated on me. When I found out, I told him I was taking our kid and leaving. He seemed cool with it, even to the point where he was willing to drive me to my friend's house to pick up empty boxes to pack my shit. On the way there, he told me I was never going anywhere again. After he attempted to kill me, I walked a mile and called the cops from a daycare that I found. They picked me up, took me home, and found him and told him he had to be out of the house for 24 hours so I could pack my shit. I called my mom, who sent my sister and nephew to drive 8 hours to pick me up with a U-Haul. I never pressed charges because it would have meant staying in that city in order to do so, and I was terrified and alone. That was almost 14 years ago. Life is so much better now. When I was a kid, so about 20 years ago, there was this weird kid in my neighborhood. His name was Chris. He always would wear camo pants, a fedora, and a black leather vest. He had an unhealthy obsession with all things Japanese and regularly wore those cheap $20 mall katanas around. I never had much interaction with him except on 2 occasions. The first was a seemingly harmless interaction. The second was when he tried to shoot me with his dad's hunting rifle. One day, me and the other kids were playing on the street. We decided to go to a small wooded area behind our houses. The way there would lead through a small piece of bare grassland Chris had claimed as his kingdom. To pass through, we needed to pay 10 cents each. As Chris was much older and bigger than us, he was about 14 years, we were 8 or 9. We couldn't do much about that, and we needed to go through to reach the woodland. So we paid the fare and went on our way. When it got dark, we wanted to go home, so we had to cross his land again. As we didn't want to pay the outrageous fare of 10 cents again, we waited till he went inside and ran through there. It was a trap. He had hidden behind a tree and ran out to catch us. All the others made it, but I was last and stumbled over a branch and got caught. He demanded $5 as a punishment, which I had to pay the next day. Well, I had no idea where I could get that kind of money. I only got $10 a month allowance, so I just didn't pay. That's where things went wrong. A month or so later, he ambushed me on my way home from school. He had hidden behind a shed, jumped out and pointed a rifle at my chest, demanding $100 as late fees. I started crying, which only sent him further into his range. He started to scream he's going to shoot me if I didn't give him the money right now. I was in an absolute panic as I didn't have $5, much less did I have $100, and he was screaming and pointing a rifle at me. I was lucky as his mom heard him screaming and my hysterical crying and went to look what was going on. When she saw what was happening, she ran over, snatched the rifle out of his hands, and slapped him at least twice. I didn't wait for her to speak. I just ran home as fast as I could. I didn't tell my parents out of fear that he's going to shoot me when he hears that I told on him. I don't know if the rifle was loaded or not, but I distinctly remember him trying to pull the trigger. Luckily, the safety was still on, and he couldn't figure out how to disengage it. That was also the last time he was seen in our neighborhood. There were some rumors about what happened to him, but none of them were proven. So Chris, if you read this, a heartfelt and sincere "fuck you, you smooth-brained brick" goes out to you. Can't be proven, but my ex-husband, I had some work done on my teeth under general anesthetic, wasn't supposed to be left alone. He laid me out in front of the gas fire and went out to do whatever. I woke up hours later to an empty house and the smell of gas everywhere. I used to chalk this up to him being thick and self-centered, but realistically, he had no need to leave that long when he was supposed to be keeping an eye on me, and he seemed really surprised to hear from me when I called, thinking back on it. When I was 16, my mother tried to smash my head open on our hardwood floor. She straddled my chest, gripped my ears and hair, and slammed the back of my head into the floor over and over again whilst screaming incoherently into my face. I managed to throw her off and ran halfway across my town screaming for help. I was ignored and later told I was exaggerating and should have stayed home to help my mother through her psychotic break. Later that same year, I had moved in with a friend and her family. A man we both knew had flirted with me in front of her that day prior, and while walking toward a coffee shop together, she shoved me in front of a bus, driving down the road, screaming that I shouldn't be such a slut. Luckily, the bus driver was able to stop in time, and I only suffered minor cuts and bruises. At 18, I was temporarily living in a flophouse, trying to get myself on my feet. One of the other inhabitants of said flophouse tore the door from my upstairs bedroom and threw it at me as I ran down the stairs after denying his sexual advances. I tripped partway down the stairs, which in turn saved my life. The door skimmed the back of my head as I stumbled. I ran from that house, leaving all of my belongings behind, and never returned. He was later arrested during an attempted sexual assault of an elderly woman. He had broken into her home earlier that night. When I was 20, the man my then boyfriend and I rented a room from brought 6 men to our home and had me gang beaten. I had recently broken my foot and was unable to defend myself. I later discovered my boyfriend had been dealing drugs from the house while I was at work. He had told the landlord it was me and that the drugs were why the rent had not been paid. I was under the impression we were 4 months in advance. My ex had forged the rent receipts. I'm now living on the other side of the country and speak to none of those people or anyone I grew up around. I'm safe and live with my wonderful husband and 2 children. I cannot express my gratitude to the people who are around me now enough. They taught me what normal could be. Probably. I have one allergy, and it's amoxicillin. Prescribed at 16, took a couple of doses as scheduled, and about an hour or so after the 3rd dose, I start feeling sick to my stomach and dizzy. Mom decides to drive me to the ER, and on the way I started breaking out into hives, and we determined I'm allergic to my antibiotics. We waited in the ER for over an hour, until I started having trouble breathing. By that point, my whole body was covered in hives. Get pumped full of Benadryl, barf, sleep for a bit, and get discharged. So now it's Z-Packs or 10-day giant pill courses of antibiotics for me. A few years later, I'm home from college for Thanksgiving. My older sister made a chocolate cake. We hate each other, but damn, can that bitch bake. I have a slice of cake. 5 minutes later, I'm vomiting in the bathroom. I stand to rinse my mouth, look in the mirror, and hives are rapidly spreading all over my body. I'm watching my chest and face turn red. Call out to my mom that I'm having an allergic reaction. She calls 911. By the time I've sat down on the sofa bed in the office 5 feet from the bathroom, I'm weak, completely covered in hives. Why do the scalp and earlobes always itch the worst? And having trouble breathing. Ambulance shows up. I get in. They start an IV and pump me full of Benadryl. go to the ER, get looked at, get discharged, go home. We explained about my allergy, how I've never reacted to anything else ever, and they want me to go for an allergy test. I didn't, because my dad fucked up the insurance stuff for me when I went off to college, but I spent the next few months with a bottle of Benadryl in my purse. But this has been bugging me since I got back to school. I've never had a reaction to food, and first-time reactions usually take more than 5 minutes to start, and definitely take longer to get worse. Get home for spring break and check the medicine cabinet. Hey, someone got prescribed amoxicillin and never finished it. I never said anything to my parents, but I've always suspected she put amoxicillin in that cake. I've never had another reaction to food. I told my friend about it, who's my sister's friend as well as a nurse, and she thinks my sister poisoned me too. So probably, but there's no way to prove it now. My brother has tried to kill me multiple times. The first was when he was in middle school. Without getting into specifics, he made a homemade explosive and attempted to kill all of us, parents, me, my baby sister. It didn't work. The explosive did not detonate. The second and third times were many years later, when we were both adults, and he'd become a drug addict. Obviously, he already had the capacity for violence. Those were much worse direct, but I don't want to get into full details. It still messes me up pretty bad to think about. We were raised together. I don't understand it. It sucks. My brother, who was a year older than me, when we were younger, maybe about 7 and 8 years old at the time, we were in the same class for swimming lessons. We were going to be swimming in the deep end, and there was a group of about 8 kids and 1 instructor. We were all treading water in the deepest area of the pool, and my brother hooked his toes into the back of my one-piece bathing suit and effectively stood on top of me in such a way that I could not bring myself to the surface of the water. Needless to say, I survived when the instructor noticed he was missing one child and pulled my brother off of me and brought me back out of the water. My brother tried this one more time within the same class, and I've never heard an ass chewing like he received from the instructor after the second attempt. That specific brother has never liked me from the moment I was born onward. Oddly enough, I think he was jealous that I was the only daughter of the family. Unfortunately, yes. My brother at the time had a really bad temper and couldn't control himself. We lived together at the time, and he was not working, but I was. When I left, he was on my computer in my room, and when I got back 10 hours later, he was still on it. I kindly asked him to log off my computer and leave my room so I could change and relax. He didn't say anything and just stayed there on my computer. After asking him politely a few times, I finally got upset and ripped the plug out of the wall and said, "Get out." He just sat there in a trance-like state and still didn't move. I told him again, and he just snapped. He pushed me aside and went to the kitchen screaming, "I hate you! I hate you!" He ran back with a knife and lunged at me, screaming that he hated me and wanted to kill me. I blocked his arm, but the knife was literally inches away from my chest. I was screaming at him, "What are you doing? Are you crazy?" He was in a mad rage, and I couldn't stop him. He was like a rabid animal. It took every ounce of strength I had to keep the knife from plunging into my chest. Finally, I screamed, "I'm calling the cops, you psycho!" And he just stopped and ran out of the house as if a switch went on in his head. He didn't come back for days after that. My mom wanted us to talk about it, but I was just in so much shock that he would do something so dark and evil to his own brother. He came back and tried to ask for forgiveness, but there was none to be had that day. I didn't even want to look at him. It took me a while to forgive him and realize he had massive issues. He has come a long way from that fateful day, and I'm not angry with him anymore. He's a better man and has worked hard to be a better person. Suffice it to say, that was the worst day of my life. Age 4, my 11-year-old brother was told to watch me in the pool. He ripped off my flotation device and threw me into the deep end and stomped off laughing. Nobody was around. I managed to learn to swim. Age 7, same brother crammed me through the arm of a chair, sat on my head and started bouncing up and down. He weighed over 200 pounds. My dog got him off of me, and then a sister came in and helped me out of the chair. My head was stuck in a turned and tilted down position for well over a month. Never saw a doctor. My parents told school I just pulled a muscle. Years later, got a CT scan for unrelated issues, and the radiologist asked, "Wow, that was a bad fracture a long time ago. Were you in a car wreck as a kid?" There were a lot of beatings, but those were the worst, as in approaching death. My parents didn't care. He was their favorite. I learned to hide and be very quiet. My happiest day of childhood was him moving away to go to college. What's the scariest thing that's happened to you while working? I think I've told this story on Reddit before, but I'll post it again with more details because I'm procrastinating homework. A few years back, I worked at a small family-owned diner in my hometown. We had a lot of regulars, and one of them was a guy who worked at a gym in the plaza where we were located. I was single at the time and had seen him on Tinder and decided to swipe right on him. I had seen him at work multiple times and figured he was cute and seemed normal enough. We matched and ended up going to get coffee. The date was alright, I guess. He just talked about himself the whole time, and I decided that I would just tell him that I wasn't really feeling it and leave it be. When we left, he tried to kiss me and I dodged it. After we parted ways, I saw on my phone that he already texted me and said what a good time he had and how he wanted to take me to a wolf sanctuary in town. I wasn't really feeling the vibe, but hadn't gotten any red flags from him, so I figured I'd give him a second chance and go. At best, we'll connect. At worst, we'll part ways and I'll get to pet some cute wolves. I told him I'd let him know my work schedule in a few days and get back to him. He started texting me daily, asking for my address and when I'd be at work again. He kept saying he just wanted to know where I lived so he could pick me up when we go to the wolf sanctuary. I get nervous easily, so this made me really panic. A few days later, I told him I was working basically all week and wouldn't be able to hang out with him. He kept pressuring me to go with him to the wolf sanctuary, and I decided to just tell him a random day and then lie that I was sick. When the day came, he started asking for my address again and saying he would rather be eco-friendly and carpool together. I told him I wasn't feeling well and had gotten called into work. Only a half lie. I did get called into work, and he seemed disappointed but fine. I went into work that afternoon, not having thought anything of it when he walked in. He asked to be sat in my section, and the host, not having any idea what was going on, let him. As he was sitting down, he took out a thermos and sat it on the table next to him. I wanted to avoid him at all costs and took his order and made myself seem busy. At one point, I was walking past him to get to one of my other tables when he asked me if I had a second. I didn't want to seem rude, so I stopped, and he asked me if I could bring him 2 mugs because he had made me a special tea since I wasn't feeling well, and he wanted me to try it. This set off huge red flags, and I told him I didn't think I could do that and ran into the back kitchen. Another server dropped off the check for me and cashed him out. I had sat in the back for 20 minutes and finally came out because I figured he had left by then. He hadn't. He saw me come out of the kitchen and walked over to the bar seating area and reached over and tucked a $5 bill into my pocket and said, "Here's your tip," with a wink, and left. Thinking the debacle was over, I just got straight back to work and apologized to my other tables for not being around much. I got back into my groove and just focused on work for a few hours when I heard the bells chime on the door. When I looked up, it was the guy again. He asked my manager if he could use the bathroom, and he said yes. As he walked to the bathroom, my manager grabbed me and took me back into the kitchen again, finally realizing something was up. He kept lookout as the guy left and then told me when the coast was clear to come back out. I had a second to check my phone and saw I had a text from the guy saying he'd be waiting outside to drive me home. I went into full-on freak-out mode. I texted him that I was uncomfortable and didn't want to see him again, and he went off on me, calling me a bitch and a whore. My manager looked outside and saw the guy circling the parking lot in his truck. We all freaked out, and they hid me in the back of the kitchen. The kitchen guys went out back out front with bats, and the guy eventually drove away. I hadn't heard from him in years when I ended up signing up at a gym in my town. He was working the counter, and I had dropped and hoped he didn't notice me because I've lost a decent amount of weight since then, but when he saw me, he said, "How are you? Last time I saw you, you weren't feeling well." Sent chills down my spine. Patient with HIV pulled out his dialysis catheter, and I had to use my bare hands to stop the bleeding. If I stopped to put on gloves, he could have bled out. Those catheters go right into a large vein. Was washing my hands in bleach the rest of my shift. All my tests came back negative, thank goodness. I work as a security guard. One night I saw what seemed to be a bird legit kamikaze down from the sky. At first I thought it was a rat or maybe something that someone threw out of a window, so I gave it a few minutes to maybe get up and crawl away. But when I zoomed in on the cameras, I saw that it wasn't moving. About 3 or 5 minutes go by, and I decide to investigate. And when I do, this thing just gets up and flies away. And at the same time, I'm not making this shit up, I got a bunch of goosebumps that ran through my body. Easily one of the freakiest things I've had happen to me in my life, and so far in 2021. I have a private office. I'm the only person in the room, and we have one secretary downstairs. We're the only 2 guaranteed people to be there every day. One time, I got a text from our secretary asking me to come downstairs. A delivery guy had shown up and was giving off really creepy vibes. Our secretary was feeling awkward and threatened, so she asked me to come downstairs. Once I did, the guy left. I don't even know if he was a real delivery guy. Had the mother of all Karens come to my work last year. I was the manager on duty one day, and while I was on my lunch, I hear someone cry. I go to investigate it, and at the register my coworker is crying in front of a lot of people, and this Karen is yelling at her. As soon as I saw that, I just snapped. I had never yelled at a customer or been rude to one before, but I ordered her out of my store. Nearly had to throw her out. The scary bit, turns out the cunt is married to someone in upper management. The security cameras made sure I kept my job though. First job, there was this fucking saw that I hated. Concept was pretty cool. It would take a tune off a bundle, cut it to length, and automatically deburr it. It could also cut 2 different lengths and keep them sorted. Well, 3, but they kept slot 3 for fall off. Anyway, it sorted tubes with a couple hydraulic doors. We were having several issues with the damn thing as usual and flew a tech from Italy to help. Of course, a tube got jammed in one of the doors and shut the thing down. The tech says to go ahead and clear it. Our operator hit the interlock and pulls the tube out. Of course, the built-up hydraulic pressure makes the door close on his arm. He was pinned pretty good. I grabbed a pair of long-handled snips laying nearby and used them to pry the door off the dude's arm. I was done. Left the snips trapped in the machine, threw my padlocks on fucking everything, taped a note on the control panel that the machine was going to stay off, called my boss about what happened, and went home feeling a bit better after learning the guy who got pinned only got a small scratch that didn't even bleed. Got a new job, within a couple of months back in the design world. Manufacturing engineers are needed. I'm not going back to that though. I'm the night shift supervisor at my job. We are often incredibly understaffed and overly busy. Being a diabetic, I took my insulin on my break, but never got a chance to eat because I had to cut my break short to handle problem customers, deliveries, etc. Come to the end of the night, I sent everyone home while I finished my tasks before closing. That's when my blood sugar absolutely tanked and I passed out in the basement office. I would have likely died if my friend didn't choose that day to randomly hang out after work. He called an ambulance, and that's the only reason I'm here today. I used to work in retail in a big warehouse-sized store. My story takes place on a dark and stormy night, seriously. I was on night shift with 2 early 20 female colleagues. The morning the news had to run a story about a young woman getting attacked as she finished her night shift at another store in our chain, so we're discussing it as we clock in. We start our shift at 9 p.m. Everyone else leaves the building and we lock ourselves in. The wind is blowing debris around the roof and the whole store is creaking a bit, so lots of little noises. We do our walk around to the storefront, discussing which displays need moved, etc., and it takes around half an hour to cover everything. Multiple times, something clanks or shuffles or creaks, and we all go, haha, just the wind. But we're all on edge. Around 9:30, we finish our walk around and are at the front of the store looking down a long, empty space with mannequins, about to split up and go work on our separate departments. That's when it happens. My manager freezes, turns deathly pale, and whispers, "Something moved." We whip around just in time to see a tall male figure vanish behind some mannequins. We don't move. We barely breathe. He clearly knows we're there. We were talking loudly a second ago. If he was trying to hide, he wouldn't have let himself be seen. So who the fuck is this maniac, and what is he about to do to us? We spend a few seconds in mute agony, imagining ourselves in a horror movie, getting stalked through the designer clothing racks by a serial killer, or at least I do. I don't know about my colleagues. My manager moves sideways to pick up a display bar for a makeshift weapon, and as she grabs it, the man reappears. Yeah, it was one of the new stock guys who was on shift till 10 p.m. and no one told us. He thought we knew he was there and was just moving displays around alone, blithely unaware that we were all collectively shitting our pants. Don't think he ever realized how close he came to being bludgeoned by my 5'3" tiny blonde manager that night. This happened about a year ago, and it was my first job. There was a coworker that I didn't talk to, nor do I remember her name, but she was an older woman. I was in the back of the store sanitizing the bathrooms and rest area because we needed to do that due to COVID. While doing so, I start hearing an argument that I would learn was with the women in question and a manager. I think it was about how she didn't get any respect or something like that. As I was leaving the rest area, the woman was coming back to the rest area. As we were about to pass each other in the hall, she slams her fist against the wall, which terrified me. So I scurried off back to the cash registers to continue my duties and ignore her. I think she left later, and I never saw her after that. I think she may have been fired, but I never asked as it wasn't my business. But it terrified me, and I still think about it from time to time. Before anyone asks, it was a discount retail store. Teacher here. Unplanned lockdowns scare the shit out of me, but I always have to hide my fear because I can see the anxiety in my kids' faces. Thankfully, we got a new app that allows for instant communication and usually gets details right away. But before the app, going on lockdown, barricading your room, huddling in a corner and not knowing why, brutal. I worked at a concrete plant in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. One of my coworkers went to lift the bucket we used to dump concrete using the forklift, and instead of leaning it back, he leaned it forward, dropped on my foot from about 2 feet, bounced off my steel toe, and I pulled my foot back before it came down again. Almost lost my toes that day. If I wasn't wearing proper boots or it hit my foot again, I wouldn't have toes on my right foot. The next day, the same coworker drove the excavator into the cement mixer and got fired. I quit a week later. I was working in a warehouse. A coworker and I were taking all of these heavy things off of shelves, moving the shelves, then putting everything back on the shelves. One of the shelves collapsed and knocked over some other shelves. I was standing between them and got pinned by the shelves and buried in the stuff that was on the shelves. My coworker had to lift the shelf off of me so I could dig my way out. Found a severed fingertip outside the back door of the restaurant I was working at. Opened the door and discovered the delivery driver from the produce company had gotten his finger nipped by the heavy steel door when the wind picked up and clean popped it off. We got him to the ER and he's back on the truck these days. Craning a large spool at work, segment of a pipeline, I had to go beside it to set up some stands for it to rest on, and one of the chains holding the spool jumped. I suddenly had 1,000 pounds of steel swinging around and above me that blocked my emergency exit. All I could do was put my hands on my head and hope not to die until it lost momentum. I worked in childcare for parents that had to work and couldn't watch their kids. One of the kids there had serious ADHD and had a learning coach with him that would only focus on him. His learning coach needed to leave early while we were getting the kids ready for pickup and told me and the other person I was working with to watch him. Well, we got distracted trying to get 10 other kids to get ready to go home, and in the span of 1 minute, he disappeared. I never felt so panicked in my entire life. Turns out, he accidentally followed the wrong group of kids that were taking the bus home, and his dad got him. The woman on bus duty came to tell us 20 minutes later. I nearly punched her. I was so pissed because she knew we were freaking out, and we only found that out his dad had because his dad came over and told us. He was super understanding. About not even 5 minutes later, the kid nearly ran into oncoming traffic when he's getting his brother into the car. I'm a stripper, and when we leave the club after our shift, a bouncer walks us to our car or watches if the car is close by. It just depends on the club. Well, this particular bouncer was not paying attention when I was leaving one night. I opened my trunk to get a water bottle for my drive home, and a car pulled up behind me yelling at me and trying to get my attention. My instincts kicked in. I just ignored the people in the car. I didn't even call for the bouncer because who knows if these people had a gun in their car or what their intentions were. I didn't want to draw attention to the fact that I could hear them and potentially escalate the situation. I quickly got into my car and locked the doors. By this time, the bouncer went back inside, I'm assuming because he heard my car door close. Almost instantly, a man was at my window knocking on it. I was fully prepared to run his feet over with my car, but luckily, the club's security car was driving around in time to take care of it. That entire drive home, I felt like I was being followed, even though I live an hour and a half away from work, and it's highly unlikely someone would follow me that far. It was still a pretty nerve-wracking experience. I used to work at a sportsman's club as a trapper, which means I threw clay targets for rich people, some of which were awesome and some of whom were the biggest assholes I ever met. One day, I was trapping for the sporting clay course, and this moron kept aiming at my launcher. I sit behind it with no shielding. He kept firing the second the arm actuated to launch the clay target, almost hitting me several times. This is cheating, since the target hasn't had a chance to arch. Not to mention, he was firing a gun at me. I spoke to him, and he told me to be quiet if I wanted a tip. We arrived at the rabbit station, which launches a rolling clay along the ground, and I went to launch his rabbit target. The fuck shot right at the machine and peppered me with birdshot. Thankfully, I knew enough to face away from this moron, and my M65 field coat only had a few holes and my skin was not broken by the shot. I walked right off the range without a word and reported him to the club president. The guy was a non-member, so they banned him on the spot. Prick. A Cheeto who was supposed to be inside her night house eating dinner while I locked up was actually behind me, stalking me and looking at me in a way that made me feel like a steak. She calmed down after I took my rain poncho off and she realized it was me, I guess. It's either that or the time I was tasked with digging in the gator nest for eggs so we could check if they were fertile and take them to an incubator. We incubated them artificially after the eggs were destroyed by fire ants every year. Many people don't know that alligators are extremely protective of their nests. Not my favorite day of work. We were putting an aircraft engine through its phases after maintenance. Then suddenly there was a loud bang and a whole aircraft shook. The engine parameters went down while the personnel monitoring in the ground radioed in and said he saw fire and smoke. We immediately shut the engine down and assessed the situation. We noticed the aircraft engine was not in an actual fire, and the fire and smoke that our ground personnel saw was a compressor stall. In the morning, a thorough engine inspection was performed, and fortunately there was no damage to any engine components. Years later, some junior colleagues described the intense shaking of the aircraft during engine run-up terrifying. All I replied was, "You ain't seen nothing yet." Was working on a barge summer between freshman and sophomore year in college, 1979. We pushed, river jargon here, fuel for jet engines, moving it along to where it would be sent to wherever it was shipped from to various airports and such. Just noon, as I was going off watch. The clutch burned out and the pilot could not control the boat and the tow. We were empty and our barges were riding high up on the water. This was one of the 2 times I saw the rest of the crew really flipped out. Could hear it in their voices. We drifted over to this part of the shoreline, Mississippi River in Louisiana, that was ideal for tying off on. We are all pulling on big, heavy ropes next to the shore on the sides of the barges to slow and stop the boat, and our 4 barges, known as the tow, and everybody is freaking. Shoreline was covered in small stones, and the barge hulls began throwing off sparks as they ground against the stones. Looked like sparklers on the 4th of July. And that is when McKean here realizes why everyone is going nuts. These 4 barges are about 25 to 30 yards long each, and lashed together, they represent close to a football field from goal line to goal line, and they are full of fumes. After we had offloaded our fuel earlier, any of those sparks finds a path inside the hull, and they would have found us stretched out from the parish line to Corpus Christi. I was a volunteer housekeeper at a summer camp. I was drying the lunch dishes and trays like I would usually do, and my period started. And then the near crippling cramps came. I told my boss that I wasn't feeling well, and everyone told me to go back to the cabins and rest. I didn't tell them exactly what was happening, just that I wasn't feeling well. So, I went back to the cabins, took some Tylenol, and took a nap. When I woke up, I felt bad about missing work, so I walked back to help, but they were done when I got there. So I just walked back to the cabins with them. Serious. Was there ever a time where you met someone and instantly had a bad vibe from them? What happened? How did it go? Yes, a friend's new boyfriend. A closer friend met him before me and said, he's not a good person. I thought, how bad could he be if he's friend's boyfriend? Within 30 seconds of meeting him, I instantly understood. The way he talked to his kids, treats his dogs, even the way he cooks. You could just tell he was an asshole and piece of shit. I met a friend from high school's new boyfriend. I hadn't seen her in years, and within 5 minutes of meeting him, I told her she should dump his ass because he seems like a bad person. She told me he was great, and they got along really well. 6 months later, she dumped him after he turned into an abusive psycho who held a knife to her throat. Went to the ER when I was 14, female, with a concussion. The doctor kept asking me weird questions and saying weird things like, you look like Angelina Jolie, and do you have a boyfriend? I love your hair. I just got some really bad vibes, and he asked my mom to leave the room whilst I got changed into a gown so he could ask me questions that I might have been too afraid to talk about in front of my mom, and I noped out of there. My mom was really annoyed, and she was screaming at me and called my grandma to come and yell at me. I definitely stood my ground, but they didn't believe doctors could be like that. The best feeling was 2 years ago. I bought them both a copy of the newspaper where the headline read, "Doctor struck off and facing criminal charges for molesting and raping patients." Honestly, one of my finest moments. It wasn't really me, but I noticed instantly that my dog didn't like him. My dog often acted a bit like a cat and took a while to get used to new people, but she'd always liked my friends eventually. He came over a lot, yet she never liked being near him or being touched by him, and even though she stopped barking at other regulars in my house, she always kept barking extra long when he was coming by. They both just started ignoring each other. Well, he ended up being the kind of guy that betrayed everyone in our friend group, talked by people's backs, started rumors, only had fake friendly persona when he wanted to keep that impression. He was only interested in any relationship as long as he could gain some social status cred for maintaining it. Overall, not a good character to keep around. Apparently, my dog could see it before any of us. My friend's cousin. He asked for a date with me, but I refused because I was so creeped out by him. Couldn't put my finger on it and got the usual shit from friends about, "Stop being so picky, just give him a chance." 10 years later, his wife divorced him because he beat her up, and another lady got a restraining order against him because he stalked her. Since then, I have always trusted my gut feeling. Yes, I'm from a non-English speaking country, and my family wants me and my sisters to learn the language. So, the teacher was from another state and apparently worked to a professional English school. But he comes to my city to work in public school that my mom worked. He was giving particular lessons to 2 groups. One was only with me, and the other was with my 3 sisters and another 2 girls. At first, he said that was because my level of English was advanced and that he will do hard lessons to me. At this point, I was confused but accepted that. Fast forward to my first lesson. My sisters have at this point about 3 lessons with him, and when has my time, he starts to talk about my sisters like, "Your sisters do not fit to my lessons," and start to talk really bad about all the other students. I got really pissed off because all of my sisters are trying their best, and he said to all of them that they are good students and they will learn fast. At that point, I really start to not like him. After this, my sister and I left his lessons and stopped talking to him, but he still gives lessons in the public school that my mom worked, and 2 of my sisters study there. My mom told stories about him trying to frame my mom and another teacher to the principal, but failed because what he was claimed made no sense. My sisters told that all his lessons in English revolved around sexual themes to 14-year-olds, and the last straw was when he got caught abusing one of his students and was blackmailing her to keep abusing her and to keep the story under the carpet. When he was found guilty, he lost his job and ran away to another state. To this day, I don't know what happened to him after he left the state. Sorry about the broken English. I only know how to translate text and voice, and I'm really good at this, but I never tried talking or writing in English. In my senior year of high school, I sat in front of this one guy in our history class. He didn't talk to me for the first few classes, but one day he randomly turned around and started conversing with me. I just felt like something was off with him, but I didn't want to stonewall someone who might have just been looking for a friend. He'd hang out with me and my friends during our free period. One time, he brought up the topic of girls. He went on and on about how he thought all white girls were sluts and how he thought Asian girls were superior in every way. He went on and on about how he wanted an Asian girlfriend, how he'd never date a white girl, shit like that. The way he was so clearly fetishizing Asian girls made me, an Asian guy, uncomfortable. It made me uncomfortable, and I wasn't even the demographic he was fetishizing. After that conversation, he'd constantly bring up how Asian girls were better than white girls, completely unprompted. I stopped talking to him not too long after that. Middle management supervisor when I used to work for the city. He was friendly and charismatic, but always gave off a bit of a creepy vibe. No one really liked him when he wasn't around, especially the one woman who worked evening shift on our crew. She claimed he was always saying creepy things to her in suggestive ways and sexually harassing her. And though we had no proof, we had no reason to doubt her. So we tried to make sure she had someone nearby when she was working alone in an area on nights he was manager. He would also humble brag about his sexual escapades with his girlfriend, even though nobody ever asked, and would talk about how pretty his girlfriend's teenage daughter was. Shortly after I quit there, I saw in the local news that he had been arrested for grooming and having sex with mentioned teenage girl. Not sure exactly what happened, but apparently he was found dead in his cell in the pre-prison processing facility. Don't know if it was suicide or someone got to him, but good riddance. This isn't a dramatic story, but recently I got offered a job offering somewhat higher salary in a company that seemed pretty cool. The CEO also seemed very cool and was nice, but I felt extremely reluctant. I was actually happy that I was considered for the position because it required a bit of a different skill set, so it felt like a big opportunity, and I reasoned that I was just too lazy to make a change and needed to ignore these doubts, just push myself. I accepted and started my trial period. I was still in my first week, and I was just miserable for almost no concrete reason. I did something rash and called my old boss, who anyway wanted me back, and then I told the new one that I just feel like it's not the right fit for me. It was a bit embarrassing, but I was as polite and honest as possible. Plus, within my rights, they could have done the same to me during that time. Later, I was able to witness a project that involved that CEO, and he was such a total petty bastard in how he interacted with people that I realized I dodged a huge bullet. If I had any doubt left, not really, my mind was finally at ease. I recently got new neighbors. It's a couple, male-female, and the woman is really nice to talk to and hang out with, but anytime I talk to her chap, never for more than a minute, he gives off some seriously weird vibes. She says he's just shy around new people, but he doesn't seem shy. He actually seems rather standoffish or unfriendly. He gives me really weird vibes from the way he talks to how he just stares at you, just wondering if anyone has ever experienced the same thing in people. I once had this Spanish teacher who I felt treated me and my fellow students strangely. He would stand too close and speak to us like we were younger than we were. It turned out it was because we were the only special ed class he taught, but our program was for kids with anxiety issues, not learning disabilities. No one had really explained that to him, so he figured he was working with a typical special ed class where the learning disabilities led to lower language skills. We voiced our complaints to the leader of the program, and I'm assuming she told him, because now he seems to understand us a lot better. He's a pretty cool guy now. My sister's baby daddy. He was around a lot when I was younger, but I always felt really uncomfortable around him. It always felt like he was watching me. He was still around during high school and didn't exactly get creepy until I was old enough. On a Valentine's Day, I was by myself, usually until my mom got off of work and my sister got home. He came over to drop stuff off for my sister. I unfortunately beforehand changed to a dress that I'd wear to bed to be comfortable and wasn't expecting anyone. I answered the door and he just instantly turned into a creep. I kind of blocked most of what he said from my mind, but basically how I've grown and would try to hit on me. I nearly slammed the door on his head because it seemed like he wanted to try something. He stayed for a moment, then left, but only to call the house phone and tell me not to say anything to anyone. I called my mom about it, but nothing was really done. He used to call to talk to his son, but would conveniently ask to speak with me. He would ask if I'd wear a bikini to go swimming with them, or just be overall disgusting. I really wish my sister had better taste in men, but unlucky for me, that wasn't the case. When we, my sister, me, and neighbor kids, who also were our friends back at the time, were young and dumb, we used to play in a big, spacious toy store. One day, a dude approached us while playing hide and seek and asked to join. Us, being dumb and naive, said yes. The dude was much bigger than us, and to me, he was really suspicious and off-putting. As for us, we were tiny kids, aged from maybe 8 to 11. So one game in, and it turns out I wasn't the only one with the weird feeling. Another kid my age went to her mother and told her about the guy, and she was mad because the dude was in his 20s and had been to jail for sexually assaulting girls, and I believe that he was also a pedo because he said he liked my younger sister and another kid. Needless to say, my friend's mother went off on him and he left us alone after, thankfully. I never forgot about him. It's been 8 to 9 years and I hope he never gets to be alone with kids. What a disgusting pervert. I worked at a bank a few years ago. My boss had to do a few interviews for a new bank teller. I had known my boss for 2 years or so at this time, technically longer because I used to bring deposits from my old previous job to this very same bank. She asked what I thought of each of the 3 applicants just offhand. I told her what I thought. I mentioned that this one girl gave me a weird vibe. There was something about how she spoke and what she spoke about that I found odd. So my boss decided, despite my opinion, that this girl was best qualified. So, for starters, The girl smelled awful. She smelled like what you would expect of a hoarder home smells like, but not the I have a lot of collectibles hoarder, more of the garbage and dead cats type hoarder. I was a teller as well, so I worked beside her. My boss actually had to bring her into the office to tell her about her smell and how bad it was. I find out she has 2 kids, who we met on and off because they would come to see her at work. She smelled horrible every day, and it was very fishy smell, if you catch my meaning. The other coworkers smelled it too, so it wasn't me. So, she would be off in her drawer very often, but then the next day it would be almost back to normal. This happened way too often. So, after 2 or 3 months, she had 1 week of vacation time. She kept talking about going back to Kansas to see her family. However, the safe way that she was talking about it, she knew she was not returning. So on her last day before vacation, I had to audit her drawer. It had to be done if someone will be gone for more than 7 days. She was short over $450. Now, we could not check her pockets, so it was marked down and would be dealt with when she returned. I spoke to my boss saying she's not coming back. My boss asked why I said this, and I mentioned how she talked about being annoyed that she had just to bring a lot of stuff with her when she went home. I also mentioned how her drawer was short over $400 and how it happened often. Sure enough, she never returned. No call, no show. She was gone. We could still check her bank account as we have that access. She overdrew her account another $400+ because she was opted in, meaning if she doesn't have the money, she can still take it, but will have to pay fees if it's not covered soon. We never saw her again. A few days later, my teller manager found a notebook when we cleaned out a work closet. It was hers, and it had daily markings of what her drawer was over or short each day she worked. This is so it would seem okay for her to not miss money here and there by essentially taking out daily loan for herself. I showed it to my boss and gave her a big I told you so eye glare, LOL. A man in a small apartment complex I lived in. I had a coworker that lived there too. I asked her about him and she said she was friends with him and he was completely harmless. We worked with children and she is like one of those super kind hippie-like people. He stands outside the dumpster smoking all the time, which happens to be near my back door since I had the first door. He'd yell. I had the only apartment in my hallway, and at 2 a.m. I'd hear him yelling at his dogs to go up the stairs. He would be very drunk. One time at work, I was on my lunch break, and my coworker was starting late. She was running up to me and said to avoid Mike, and that they broke up into her apartment the night before. He'd also trap other women in the complex into conversation with him. The cops got involved as well as the landlords. They asked me questions. I didn't stay there after my 1-year lease was up because he was still there. After I moved out a couple months later, I was in the neighborhood and he was by the dumpster being drunk at noon. I worked in another place since then, but I work super close to that complex now and haven't seen him, so he's no longer there. Still not planning on living at that complex again since it was a super small micro studio. Lived in a block of flats for a while a few years ago. Some man who lived at the bottom was always fixing bicycles. That seemed to attract a lot of kids, getting him to fix and mod their bikes. He had quite a significant learning disability too. Most of the neighbors took pity on him because of this. But there was something off about him, and it certainly wasn't his disability. It turned out he was a registered child sex offender. He was run out of there when everyone knew. At the 7th grade, currently in 10th, I met this really tall guy that I had repeated the 7th grade 2 times. When I looked at him for the first time, I've immediately thought, holy shit, this guy looks like a gangster. No joke. And my thoughts weren't exactly wrong, except for the gangster part was completely fine with him for the first 2 weeks of school. But then we started to talk. He seemed pretty chill at first, but then he started to get really annoying. He'd randomly start slapping me lightheartedly. At the end, we'd laugh it off, but then after several months, he started to get unbearable. He was extremely annoying and would make fun of me all the time, again, lightheartedly. Eventually, we got to 8th grade. He didn't change, didn't talk to him much, and then 9th, he wasn't at the same class at me. I missed him at first, but then realized he was a really fake friend. Now in 10th grade, I'm keeping as far away as possible from him. A coworker. I walked into her office and just looking at her, I knew she was evil. She was immediately too friendly, and after being introduced, she said something mean about someone in the organization. It just rubbed me the wrong way. A few days after that, I saw her shouting at her manager about something put on the manager's control. A few days after that, she came to my office and started talking crap about 3 coworkers I liked fairly well. There were many other times I saw her shouting at her manager and was just shut down with calm nods. She just left me feeling exhausted every time I spoke with her. She got fired less than a year after I started. The entire organization is a much better place to be without her. Pretty sure I came across a serial killer. I was standing at a service station, Australia, waiting for a lift from my workmate as I'd had to drop my car for service. Coincidentally, that morning the power had gone down and phones weren't working. This beat-up car pulls up beside me and the driver offers me a lift. I looked into this guy's eyes and my whole body pricked with goosebumps. They were like a shark's eyes, dead. Thing is, the guy didn't ask where I was going, just that he was going my way. He was really insistent that my friend wasn't coming and I should let him give me a lift. I walked away toward the road, a more public space, saying, "No thanks, I'm good." I just wish I'd taken a note of his plates. But I was so freaked out, I didn't think of that until later. Luckily, my friend turned up, and then I jumped in and we drove off. My heart was pumping.